Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970 in Indiana, United States, to a middle-class family and have a brother. From a young age, John had a strong ambition to succeed. He valued being independent and continually sought ways to better himself, as well as looking for opportunities for growth and advancement. After graduating from high school, John began searching for ways to earn money. According to his brother, John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant. However, he quit his job soon after, but the exact reason for his departure is unclear. Undeterred, John quickly found a new job that offered more freedom, allowing him to explore and develop his passion for pursuing a career in sales. John started working as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. Initially, his family teased him, but he soon demonstrated his capabilities to everyone, and he also found his purpose in life. By the end of his first year, John had become one of the company's top salesmen, and he was eager to continue achieving more. John worked extremely long hours, typically between 12 to 16 hours a day. As a result, he became a top sales performer, earning recognition at company meetings. John's success also made him a source of inspiration and guidance for his fellow salespeople. During this time, he met Judy, a 20-year-old woman from a low-income family in Texas. Judy was born in October 1969. She was confident, extremely, and outgoing. Although John wasn't planning to hire any additional salespeople at the time, but she was able to convince John that she had what it took to achieve great success in sales. Judy's past was marked by significant life events. With her parents' consent, she had gotten married at the age of 14 and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, but it ultimately ended in divorce. When she met John, she was determined to start a new chapter in her life. John decided to give Judy a chance, taking her under his wing as a mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy prove herself as a valuable member of the sales team, but she also won John's heart. As time passed, they began to date. John's life was thriving, both personally and professionally. He has built a solid reputation for his sales and training abilities, and most importantly, he has the love and support of his wife Judy. John expanded on his experience by starting his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. He also offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and enthusiasm that had made him successful in the industry. John's company quickly rose to the top in the area, and he credited his success to Judy's support. After establishing his career, John and Judy got married in 1992. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica. As John's business continued to thrive, they relocated to better homes, providing their children with access to excellent schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had a very good relationship with Judy's stepchildren, Christina and Daniel. Christina was a sweet girl, while Daniel was more energetic and mischievous. The family enjoyed a comfortable life, thanks to John's growing wealth. He openly showcased his success to motivate the young salespeople he trained, demonstrating the potential rewards of hard work and determination. However, as Judy's children entered their teenage years, problems arose. Christina associated with a group of friends who had unhealthy habits, and as a result she started drinking with them. According to some reports, Christina has also used drugs. Meanwhile, Daniel, 13, often appears angry and doesn't seem to fit in with his friends. On one occasion, Daniel took John's car and recklessly drove around the neighborhood with friends, damaging several mailbox posts. The next day, John visited each affected house, compensating the homeowners for the damage, to prevent them from filing a police report about the boys' actions. Around this time, John was also summoned to Daniel's school that the boy had misbehaved and they needed to discuss the issue. John and Judy's relationship became strained after he got into a physical altercation with Daniel. After 9 years together, Judy took her family to Texas to visit her childhood home and meet her brother. During the trip, Judy confided in her brother about her troubled marriage and John's mistreatment of her children. However, the situation was more complex. Judy's older children were misbehaving, and she took their side, which added to the tension. Things escalated when John suspected Judy of having an affair with one of his employees. John installed cameras in the office to gather evidence. When he obtained proof of Judy's infidelity, his life was turned upside down, and his demeanor changed drastically. He began to drink heavily, which led to intense arguments with Judy and rough treatment of their children. One incident involved his daughter Tiffany, who was beaten with a belt for not bringing her homework to school. When her teacher noticed the marks the next day, she reported it to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the 4 kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they should say nothing about the beating. Consequently, Tiffany blamed her stepbrother Daniel. John's bad mood not only affected his family but also his employees and clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage. To keep Judy away from her lover, John moved the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite his hopes for a fresh start, things did not improve. Judy started to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, while John let himself go, growing his beard, smoking, and wearing only jeans. He became increasingly distracted. The business struggled due to John's condition, nearly going bankrupt and forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Office rumors swirled about Judy's alleged affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, fueling more arguments. At one point, Judy told John she wanted a divorce, but it wouldn't be straightforward. John felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, accepting her children, and showering her with luxuries. When love turns to resentment, he began cutting off Judy's financial sources. John made it clear that if she left, she would leave with nothing, and he had a secret recording of her infidelity with the office employee. This was the situation at the start of 2003. The tension between John and Judy affected the children, whose behavior worsened. Even Tiffany was grounded during the holidays for starting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The arguments finally ended on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy went out to dinner. They were likely looking for a way to resolve issues and reduce the tension between them. After dinner, the couple called home to check on their kids and told them they would be back soon. Then, Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. As John and Judy left the restaurant, John decided to bring the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was supposedly working late at the office. John and Judy arrived at the office, located in a deserted industrial area. Just before 10 p.m. John went inside to talk to Jeff, while Judy picked up Christina's notebook and returned to the car. A few minutes later, John came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side of the car to look for something. Suddenly, 2 loud bangs were heard, and John collapsed on the ground. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911. Police and medical units arrived at the scene within minutes. Unfortunately, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. When questioned by the police, Judy, who was inside the car when the incident happened, was unable to provide much information. Judy said she was sitting in the car when John came out of the office and opened the back door on the driver's side. Immediately, she heard 2 loud shots. Judy's reaction was to hide behind the seat. When she finally lifted her head, she caught a glimpse of a man in dark clothing running away from the car. Initially, it seemed like a robbery because John's wallet was missing. However, as investigators examined the scene more closely, they began to have doubts. John and Judy hadn't told anyone they would be there, which raised several questions. What were the chances of a random robbery in a deserted industrial are very rare. If the motive had been robbery, it's puzzling that the perpetrator would first kill John and then take his wallet. This is especially confusing since John was visibly wearing a valuable gold Rolex and other easily accessible jewelry. Typically, thieves would thoroughly search the victim's pockets in such situations. The fact that this didn't happen raises more questions than answers. 2 bullet casings were found at the scene, which supports Judy's account of hearing 2 shots. 1 shot killed John instantly, but there's no official information about the second shot. With many unanswered questions, investigators started work taking a statement from Judy. Judy reported that her husband had argued with an employee from his company prior to the incident and identified the individual. However, she couldn't provide any additional information beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, who was inside the office, also couldn't offer any useful insights, as when he heard the gunshots and went outside, it was all over. Meanwhile, authorities informed Christina, a Parker resident, that her stepfather had passed away. With robbery ruled out as a motive, detectives turned their attention to John's circle of relatives and colleagues. They began with an employee who had allegedly argued with John, but the employee claimed they had resolved their issues amicably and had a verified alibi. The investigation expanded, include John's business partners, employees, competitors, friends, and family. Judy's behavior during the funeral surprised and puzzled many people, as she seemed cheerful and socialized with friends, which was unexpected given the circumstances. Her ex-husband was also seen casually reading a newspaper at the funeral. For days after the murder, police brought in 15-year-old Daniel for questioning because he was accused of hiring gang members to kill his stepfather, John. When questioned, Daniel admitted to paying someone to hurt John, but claimed he only wanted him injured, not killed. The police arrested one of the young men that Daniel had hired, but they were released after their alibi checked out. Daniel was also released after 9 days due to lack of evidence and his status as a minor. Later, it was discovered that John had problems with Judy's children, which led to further investigation into Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and this lead also went nowhere. However, investigators were left wondering who was providing the money for these schemes, and they suspected Judy was the source. Further investigation showed that Judy and John's relationship had gotten much worse before he died, and Judy's affair was discovered. However, sources revealed that John had no plans to leave his wife and was trying to save their relationship. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband seemed to be financial gain, as detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. After John's death, Judy tried to claim this money, but the insurance company initially refused to pay due to the ongoing investigation. Receiving the insurance money becomes even more complicated when John's father suspects Judy of being involved in his son's death. Despite these leads, the case stalled due to lack of concrete evidence. Over time, the John family household underwent substantial transformations. Judy was rarely at home, as she was busy with her new partner, Jeff, who was John's trusted manager. In Judy's absence, Christina and Daniel took care of Tiffany and Erica. Later, Judy and Jeff moved out of state with Tiffany and Erica, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina, who was pregnant and had a boyfriend, stayed in the house. Although the investigation had stalled, authorities kept the case open, regularly reviewing the files in hopes of finding new leads. Their persistence paid off when they came to question some of Christina and Daniel's classmates. These schoolmates admitted to selling a firearm to Christina and Daniel. This information prompted detectives to investigate a piece of land owned by the family that Christina used for target practice. Upon inspection, several bullet casings were found. Laboratory analysis revealed a crucial clue: the bullet casings matched those from the crime scene where John was killed. In 2007, a colleague who was a narcotics officer provided additional information. The narcotics officer had been tracking Christina's ex-boyfriend, who was involved in a drug case and was arrested, to request a lighter sentence. Christina's former boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In this conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new information, 21 years old, Christina, who was linked to the weapon used in the crime, began to cooperate. She admitted to buying the weapon and calling John and Judy on the night of the incident. She had asked them to stop by the office, claiming she needed to pick up forgotten homework. Christina confessed to being part of a plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel designated as the shooter. When Daniel was 19, he was found and arrested in Arizona. Daniel was shown new evidence about the shooting and Christina's statement. He admitted to shooting John, but said his mother, Judy, was the one who planned the whole thing. Daniel said Judy had forged checks from her company to get the $7,500 to hire someone to kill John. However, when the people she hired took the money without doing the job, Judy told them to buy a gun for Daniel to use instead. Daniel also said it was Judy's idea to make up a reason for leaving the house that night by calling about homework. He said he shot John once in the head, and the second shot was an accident that happened while he was looking through John's pockets for his wallet, as his mother had told him to do. Daniel was also told to come back home without telling his younger sisters what had happened. His sister Christina helped by keeping the girls busy watching TV. Daniel said Judy convinced them to commit the crime by telling them they were being abused by John. And Judy promises them a better life with more money and freedom. It was also discovered that Judy had previously attempted to kill her husband. She had tried to poison his food, which resulted in John being briefly hospitalized with what was thought to be food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina pleaded not guilty to conspiracy and was released on bail. In March 2008, Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to admit his guilt and testify against his mother. The prosecution agreed not to charge him with murder, but he still faced a prison sentence of 20 to 25 years. Daniel claimed that when he was 14, about a year before the incident, his mother and sister asked him to help kill John. His mother gave him and his sister money to buy a pistol, black clothing, gloves, and a mask to wear on the day of the crime. She also instructed him on what to do, including showering after the crime to remove gunpowder residue. Judy took responsibility for disposing of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after John's death, Judy turned herself in and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. She admitted to planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution asked for a sentence of 28 to 35 years in prison. Judy, almost 40, was sentenced to 33 years in late August 2009. Daniel was sentenced to 23 years in September, and Christina received a 5-year sentence in October. Press reports state that Daniel was released from custody in 2017. He then chose to keep a low profile. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but she tragically died from a drug overdose. This case was driven by greed. Although Judy was successful, her greater desires led her to terrible crimes. Judy's actions not only destroyed a successful business owner but also had a profound impact on her 4 children. 2 of them ended up in prison, and the younger ones were left without their parents once again. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown, born in 1979, is an energetic and vibrant woman. She has the ability to spread positive energy to those around her through her optimistic attitude and way of life. People who know her often wonder how she can do so much and still maintain such a positive spirit. But in fact, her positive energy comes from being a mother, a role that she always loves and cherishes. She and her son Noah have a special relationship. Although no one knows about Noah's father, it does not affect their lives. Jennifer became stronger after Noah was diagnosed with autism. She has become a strong support and best friend to her son. The relationship between Jennifer and Noah is known and admired by everyone. They spend a lot of time together, share happy moments and support each other when needed. The small town also loved the family for their cheerfulness and kindness. However, no one could have predicted Jennifer's disappearance. On January 3, 2023, she disappeared without a trace. The next morning, the Limerick Township Police Department received a missing person call from Antonio Blair Watts Richardson, a close friend of Jennifer's. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard her voice, his anxiety was growing. Blair Watts had been trying to contact Jennifer for hours without success. All his attempts went unanswered. This behavior was completely unlike her, as she was a responsible person who always answered calls or messages, especially when it came to matters related to her son Noah. However, on this day, the boy's mother did not come to pick him up after school. This made Jennifer's family and friends very worried, as they knew her to be a caring mother who always cared about her children. This sudden disappearance made everyone feel uneasy. Blair Watts' call to the police was the beginning of a long and mysterious investigation that would later affect the entire city and cause a great tragedy. After Blair Watts reported his girlfriend missing, a major search began. Police, family, and friends joined forces, hoping to find any clues that could shed light on Jennifer's disappearance. Many questions were raised, and the main one was what could have caused this caring mother to abandon her son without any explanation. At 4 p.m. that afternoon, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department arrived at Jennifer's family home to investigate the situation. Upon arrival, Officer Stephen found Jennifer's car still parked on the front porch. Upon entering the home, he discovered that her keys, wallet, and tablet were still inside the home. However, Jennifer's cell phone was nowhere to be found. During further investigation, police discovered that Jennifer's phone had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and had not been located since. The phone's last recorded location was near Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick Township. This discovery was a serious sign in the investigation, suggesting that something terrible might have happened to Jennifer. Young Jennifer Brown is missing and the police have begun an investigation. Investigators have questioned her family, friends, and neighbors, hoping to find information about her disappearance. However, no one has been able to provide useful information. Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Blair Watts are convinced that Jennifer would never have left alone. The reason is that she could not leave her son. She was a loving and devoted mother. All efforts by authorities and volunteers have been fruitless. They have not found any trace or clues to Jennifer's whereabouts. Her loved ones have appealed to the public through the media for information about her disappearance. A reward has been offered, but to no avail. Jennifer Brown's disappearance has left both investigators and her family with many questions and concerns. The police investigation has begun to examine every detail of the day she went missing. Blair Watts, the last close friend to see Jennifer alive, has come forward to share her story. On a typical January afternoon, Jennifer and Blair Watts chatted intimately in the warm living room about life, future plans, and their children. The two families' children often played together, and Jennifer asked Blair to pick up Noah from school so they could enjoy the evening together. This was normal for them because they were close friends. However, the next day, when Blair Watts went to pick up Noah from school, things took a strange turn. Noah was behaving erratically and the teachers were worried. They discovered that Noah had missed 2 important doses of medication to help control his illness. Jennifer was a very caring and nurturing mother. So when she did not contact the school about Noah's situation, everyone was surprised. School officials searched for information about Jennifer and discovered that she had left home to go to the grocery store but did not return as scheduled. This was very unlike Jennifer, who was always worried and concerned about her children. This incident made everyone even more worried. Jennifer's friend, Blair Watts, tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. When she did not receive a response, Blair Watts decided to check if Jennifer had picked up her son at the bus stop. However, when Jennifer did not appear, Blair Watts became concerned and decided to report the incident to the police. After the report, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hopes of her return faded. It seemed that Jennifer had disappeared without a trace. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after the disappearance was reported, 2 employees working in a warehouse near Roseford discovered a newly dug hole. When they investigated, they discovered the body of a woman buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who went to the burial site. After an autopsy, the police identified the young woman as Jennifer Brown. The sheriff contacted her family and informed them that Jennifer's body had been discovered near a warehouse in Roseford. Jennifer's autopsy revealed that she had died from abuse and asphyxiation. She also had 3 broken ribs, indicating that she had struggled with her attacker before she died. This evidence changed the nature of the investigation, and the missing person case was upgraded to a homicide case. The police began questioning people close to Jennifer, including her family and friends. However, these interviews did not yield any new information, and the police have yet to find a suspect. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill as no new evidence emerged. But surprisingly, the police received important information from Noah's former teacher. After Jennifer was reported missing, the police asked anyone with information to contact them. This call caught the attention of a former teacher of Noah, who decided to come forward to the police. A teacher recalled Jennifer's case, which initially seemed trivial but raised suspicions after the verdict. The teacher said Noah shared with her a key piece of information regarding the incident that occurred on January 4th, the day Jennifer went missing. Noah told her that when Blair Watts picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mother's personal cell phone in Blair Watts' pocket. He immediately recognized the phone because a childhood photo of himself was displayed on the lock screen. This became the key to the investigation into Jennifer's murder. The police had previously assumed that the killer had taken Jennifer's cell phone, but Blair Watts now became the prime suspect. As they delved deeper into the relationship between Jennifer and Blair Watts, hidden secrets began to emerge. This surprised the investigators. On the surface, the relationship between the two seems very close and understanding, and their families also interact frequently. However, when looking closely at the business transactions, the seemingly simple initial relationship turns out to be hidden under a layer of long-standing hatred. In fact, this friendship is closely tied to their business, and that creates unpredictable conflicts. What's more special, people have discovered disputes stemming from that relationship. For example, the breakdown of the business left Blair Watts with emotional conflicts that were difficult to overcome when the Bird's Kitchen store itself was closed in January 2022. After approaching Jennifer, in August 2022, Blair Watts received an offer of help. Jennifer decided to invest in his business to help revive Bird's Kitchen at a new location. Under the agreement, Jennifer would provide financial support to the restaurant every 6 weeks or so. Between August and January, Jennifer transferred $36,000 to Blair Watts to rebuild the business. She also agreed to provide an additional $99,000. However, Blair used the money for her own personal needs instead of investing in the restaurant. When the property owner discovered that Blair Watts had not met her financial obligations, they terminated the lease on December 26, 2022. This left Blair Watts in a desperate situation, losing money and the opportunity to reopen the restaurant. In desperation, Blair decided to commit a serious crime to save her business. During the investigation of Jennifer's case, investigators scrutinized the financial transaction history on her iPad. They discovered 2 illegal transfers of $177,000 to Bertie's Kitchen on January 3rd. These payments were not mentioned in the official agreement between Jennifer and Blair Watts. It is worth noting that these transfers initially failed because Jennifer's iPad had two-factor authentication enabled. However, after disabling the authentication system, the transfers were successful. This led investigators to suspect that Jennifer's boyfriend, Blair Watts, may have been involved in the murder. Investigators interviewed the property owners Blair Watts had rented. They discovered that on January 4th, the same day Blair Watts reported Jennifer missing, he came to them to sign the lease, claiming he had the money. Police then conducted an interview with Blair Watts' wife, Tiara Taylor, to determine where Blair Watts had been on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara said Blair Watts had visited Jennifer's family on January 3rd and did not return home until early the next morning. He returned home briefly, then left around 5 p.m. and did not return home until late in the evening. Further investigation revealed that Blair Watts had stayed at the home of his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and did not see anyone else until around 8 p.m. This meant that between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., Blair Watts had no evidence to suggest that he was not at the scene of the crime. Based on the available evidence, detectives developed a scenario for the murder. According to this scenario, on January 3rd, Blair Watts went to Jennifer's house around 1 p.m. while Noah was at school and likely killed her. After committing the crime, Blair Watts transferred money from Jennifer's iPad to his account. He then picked up Noah at the bus stop around 4 p.m. When he returned to Jennifer's house, he dropped Noah off and returned to the crime scene to dispose of the body. He took the body to a field near Roseford and buried it in a shallow grave. Blair Watts then went to Tatiana's house and stayed there overnight. However, he made a serious mistake. He let Noah see his mother's cell phone. This was important evidence that helped the police quickly find the killer. Law enforcement had enough evidence to convict, but they decided to investigate further to gather more information. To investigate further, the police requested the participation of film experts and a specially trained dog that could detect the scent of a corpse. First, the dog was brought to Jennifer's house to memorize the woman's scent. The police then led the dog to Blair Watts' car and it immediately detected a foul odor. This was the final key piece of evidence that solidified detectives' belief that Blair Watts was involved in the murder. On February 8, after months of investigation, Blair Watts was arrested and charged with aggravated murder, and burglary. He is currently being held in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing. When Jennifer's friends and family found out she was dead, they were shocked and heartbroken. But what made them even more heartbroken was that the killer was someone they knew and trusted. Now that Blair Watts has been arrested and brought to trial, they can finally rest easy knowing that justice has been served. Tiffany Barron, a friend of Jennifer's, spoke on behalf of the family. In an interview, she expressed her feelings. She still dreams about Jennifer. Jennifer's son, Noah, keeps asking about his mother and she doesn't know how to answer. If Blair Watts is convicted after the investigation and trial, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. The case was solved thanks to the keen observation of Jennifer's 8-year-old son. He discovered Blair Watts' mistake, helped solve the case and punish the culprit. In the somber confines of the courtroom, Menhaz Zaman stood before the judge, his voice trembling with remorse as he expressed the depths of his regret for the irreparable harm he had caused. With heavy hearts, he sought forgiveness from all those he had wronged, especially those who had lost loved ones as a result of his unforgivable actions. Acknowledging the profound damage inflicted upon his family and the wider community, Menhaz bowed his head in shame, unable to escape the weight of his guilt. November 2020 marked the fateful moment when Menhaz's fate was sealed with a life sentence, condemning him to spend the next 4 decades behind bars. At the tender age of 24, he was stripped of his freedom, serving time for the deaths of 4 individuals who had once been dear to him. His father, Manur, taken at 59, his mother, Momotaz, at 50, his grandmother at 70, and his sister, tragically gone at the tender age of 21. Despite the sacrifices made for his well-being, Menhaz's actions had brought nothing but devastation upon his family. As he languished in the confines of his prison cell, Menhaz grappled with the emptiness and loneliness that engulfed his once vibrant life. Cut off from the virtual world he had once sought solace in, he was forced to confront the gravity of his prolonged deception. In the quiet solitude of his confinement, he reflected on the twisted web of lies he had spun to maintain his facade, the weight of his deception bearing down upon him like a leaden burden. The truth of Menhaz's deception came to light as he stood trial, each revelation serving as a painful reminder of the betrayal and deceit that had torn his family apart. The Zan family, once united in love and solidarity, now faced the harsh reality of their shattered lives, haunted by the knowledge that their own flesh and blood had been responsible for their unimaginable loss. In the end, as Menhaz faced the consequences of his actions, he could only hope that his remorse would serve as a meager consolation to those he had wronged. But as the doors of his prison cell closed behind him, he knew that no amount of regret could ever undo the irreparable damage he had wrought upon the lives of those he held most dear. As the fake graduation date of July 28 drew near, Menhaz's behavior took a disturbing turn. Seemingly unraveling before the eyes of those around him, he adopted the persona of a lost soul, referring to himself as a subhuman unworthy of life. Dark jokes about suicide peppered his conversations, revealing the depths of his despair. But who was this troubled individual? Menhaz Zaman, a young Canadian with a promising future, appeared to be living the dream as a mechanical engineering student at York University. However, the truth was far from what it seemed. In reality, Menhaz had never set foot on the university campus. Concealing this fact from his parents, he plunged deeper into a world of deceit, fabricating elaborate tales to maintain his facade of academic success. Each passing year brought new challenges as he struggled to uphold his double life, the pressure mounting as graduation loomed on the horizon. The strain took its toll on Menhaz's mental well-being, pushing him to the brink of desperation. In a desperate bid for attention, Menhaz resorted to unthinkable measures. On that fateful day, he committed the ultimate act of betrayal, snuffing out the lives of his own family members in a chilling display of violence. Posting photos of his heinous crime on his Discord channel, he sought to shock and horrify, drawing the gaze of a horrified audience. While some initially dismissed his actions as a tasteless prank, the grim reality soon became undeniable. Despite Menhaz's efforts to conceal his identity, the truth of his origins lay in a land far from the bustling streets of Toronto. Born from the complex tapestry of Bangladesh, his family had harbored dreams of a better life in the promise of a new beginning. Manyo Zan, his father, and Momas, his mother, had embarked on a journey of hope, leaving behind their homeland to seek their fortune in Canada. Their arrival in Toronto marked the beginning of a new chapter, filled with aspirations for a brighter future. With the birth of Menhaz and later Mesa, they endeavored to create a loving and nurturing environment for their children. Momas, in particular, was hailed as a beacon of kindness and generosity, her unwavering support a source of strength for the family and the broader Bangladeshi immigrant community. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy lay a web of secrets and lies, woven by Menhaz in his relentless pursuit of acceptance and validation. The tragic events that unfolded would serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the devastating consequences of unchecked deception. And as Menhaz's dark descent came to light, the world could only watch in horror, grappling with the incomprehensible depths of his betrayal. Moni Roos, husband to Momotaz, possessed a quiet demeanor that belied his deep sense of pride and devotion to his family. Known as an introvert within the neighborhood, he commanded respect through his modesty and unwavering dedication. A devout Muslim, Moni placed his family above all else, embodying the values of faith and integrity in his daily life. For years, he toiled as a taxi driver, his commitment to his profession earning him recognition as one of the finest in the city. Having relocated to the bustling metropolis in pursuit of a better life, Moni and Momotaz harbored lofty ambitions for their children. Mesa and Menhaz, the apples of their parents' eyes, were envisioned as future pillars of success, destined for lucrative careers that would afford them comfort and prosperity. Despite their own humble beginnings, Moni and Momotaz were determined to provide their offspring with every opportunity for advancement, sparing no effort in their quest for success. Their journey towards prosperity began modestly, with the purchase of a humble abode on Mowen Road in Scarborough. Through prudent financial planning and astute investments, they soon expanded their portfolio, acquiring 2 additional properties in the same area and a house nearby in Danforth. Momotaz assumed the role of property manager, overseeing their growing assets with precision and care. As the family's fortunes continued to ascend, so too did Momotaz's sense of responsibility towards her children and their burgeoning real estate empire. Recognizing the need for support, her mother Fosa made the journey from India to lend a helping hand. With her assistance, Momotaz found equilibrium between her professional endeavors and personal life, ensuring that both flourished in tandem. In 2006, they embarked on a significant investment, purchasing a spacious 4-bedroom house in the neighboring town of Markham. This move symbolized their aspirations for a brighter future, aligning with the widely held belief that success in life hinged on careers in medicine or engineering. Mesa harbored dreams of becoming a neurosurgeon, while Menhaz was earmarked for a career in engineering, in line with his parents' hopes and aspirations. However, the path to success proved arduous, fraught with challenges and unforeseen obstacles. Melissa, their eldest daughter, rebelled against their expectations, often veering off course with reckless behavior. Her defiance strained the familial bonds, leading to conflicts that spilled beyond the confines of their home and attracted the unwanted attention of law enforcement. Despite their best efforts, Moni and Momotaz struggled to rein in Melissa's wayward tendencies, her actions casting a shadow over the family's aspirations. In stark contrast, Menhaz exuded a quiet and reserved demeanor, forging a close bond with his mother, Momotaz. She doted on him, fulfilling his every need and desire, showering him with love and attention. Menhaz, the eldest son, felt the weight of his parents' expectations bearing down on him, driving him to excel and meet their lofty standards. Yet, beneath the facade of familial harmony, Menhaz sought solace in the virtual realm of online gaming, immersing himself in virtual worlds where he found refuge from the pressures of reality. His fascination with MMO games like Perfect World provided an escape from the rigors of everyday life, offering a platform for self-expression and social interaction. While his peers pursued academic endeavors, Menhaz retreated further into the confines of his room, spending hours on end immersed in online gaming communities. Despite the facade of academic success, Menhaz grappled with a sense of inadequacy and the burden of unmet expectations. Upon receiving news of his acceptance into the mechanical engineering program at York University, Menhaz's achievement was hailed as a triumph, further cementing his status as the family's favored child. Yet, beneath the veneer of success lay a mounting pressure to prove himself worthy of their adulation. With each passing day, the weight of expectations bore down on Menhaz, driving him further into the depths of his virtual refuge. As the weight of expectations mounted, Menhaz retreated further into the virtual realm, seeking solace in the digital landscapes of online gaming. Venturing into an enhanced version of the Perfect World game, he found camaraderie among fellow players, forging connections within the confines of this virtual community. Through the popular social network Discord, Menhaz maintained contact with friends and acquaintances, finding a sense of belonging that eluded him in the real world. Within the game, Menhaz shed the constraints of his shy and reserved persona, embracing his true self in a space where authenticity thrived. Here, amidst the pixels and avatars, he felt liberated from the burdens of reality, free to express himself without fear of judgment or censure. The supportive atmosphere fostered friendships that transcended the boundaries of the game, providing Menhaz with a sense of belonging that he struggled to find elsewhere. Meanwhile, Melissa's rebellion continued unabated, her defiance a constant source of tension within the family home. Despite their efforts to rein her in, her actions only served to exacerbate the already strained atmosphere. Her departure from home did little to alleviate the palpable tension, leaving a void that Menhaz sought to fill with his virtual escapades. In the eyes of their parents, Menhaz emerged as the beacon of hope, the embodiment of their aspirations for a brighter future. They boasted of his supposed acceptance into York University's prestigious engineering program, basking in the imagined glory of his academic achievements. However, beneath the facade of parental pride lay a web of deception, as Menhaz's purported success crumbled under scrutiny. In reality, Menhaz's academic journey took a different trajectory, far removed from the lofty heights his parents envisioned. Instead of York University, he found himself enrolled in the less prestigious confines of Seneca Community College, his dreams of academic success shattered. Struggling to keep pace with his studies, he grappled with feelings of loneliness and disillusionment, his sense of identity eroded by the weight of unmet expectations. Frustrated by the suffocating grip of parental control, Menhaz rebelled against the constraints imposed upon him, casting aside the religious beliefs that once anchored him. His disillusionment only deepened as he confronted the stark reality of his circumstances, grappling with a sense of betrayal and abandonment. Amidst the wreckage of broken dreams, Menhaz sought solace in the virtual embrace of online gaming, the only refuge left in a world fraught with disappointment and deceit. Despite his tumultuous relationships and mounting academic struggles, Menhaz sought solace and independence through his online interactions. His burgeoning romance with a girl he met on the internet only served to stoke his parents' disapproval and exacerbate his frustration. Nevertheless, Menhaz remained determined to assert his autonomy, finding refuge in the immersive world of Perfect World and the vibrant Discord community. Initially, Menhaz managed to maintain a facade of academic diligence, but as his obsession with gaming intensified, his grades suffered a precipitous decline. His once promising academic career spiraled into chaos as he began skipping classes and neglecting his studies altogether. Despite his academic freefall, Menhaz managed to conceal the extent of his academic failures from his unsuspecting parents, who remained oblivious to his academic woes. Each day, Menhaz embarked on a carefully orchestrated charade, leaving home ostensibly to attend classes at York University. In reality, he spent his days ensconced in a local cafe, engrossed in his virtual pursuits. From there, he would make a cursory visit to the gym before returning to his online haven, where he whiled away the hours until the late hours of the night. Menhaz's online persona belied the darkness that consumed him, as he frequently joked with his virtual companions about his impending incarceration and his impending departure from their midst. However, beneath the veneer of levity, his humor took on a sinister edge, laced with aggression and hostility. His increasingly provocative remarks drew ire from community members, culminating in his eventual banishment from the platform. Despite the mounting concerns surrounding Menhaz's behavior, his online associates dismissed his antics as mere attention-seeking, failing to recognize the depths of his isolation and despair. As Menhaz retreated further into his virtual cocoon, Melissa sought to forge her own path, severing ties with her family and pursuing her academic aspirations at York University. From the outside, the Zaman family appeared to be on the cusp of a new chapter filled with promise and potential. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Menhaz's descent into darkness would soon shatter the illusion of familial harmony, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. On July 27, 2019, the Zaman household buzzed with the usual activity, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Menhaz, calculating and methodical, seized the opportunity to set his sinister plan into motion. With chilling composure, he crept into his mother's bedroom, armed with a crowbar. In a swift and brutal assault, He rendered her unconscious with a single blow to the head before mercilessly slitting her throat. The scene of carnage was soon replicated as Menhaz turned his attention to his unsuspecting grandmother, dispatching her with the same ruthless efficiency. Having executed his heinous acts, Menhaz retreated to the confines of his room, his facade of normalcy now shattered. With a sense of perverse satisfaction, he chronicled his atrocities on Discord, sharing grotesque images of his victims' mutilated bodies alongside the implements of his depravity. To some, accustomed to Menhaz's macabre sense of humor, the ghastly display seemed like another tasteless joke. However, for those unaccustomed to such dark behavior, it sparked genuine alarm and disbelief. As the gravity of Menhaz's actions began to dawn on his online acquaintances, panic ensued. The realization that a potential spree of violence was unfolding in real time left them feeling helpless and powerless to intervene. Desperate to prevent further bloodshed, they frantically scrambled to identify the perpetrator, but Menhaz had meticulously concealed his identity, leaving them grasping at straws. Amidst the chaos, Junior, a close friend of Menhaz, found himself bombarded with inquiries from concerned users seeking insight into his friend's motives. Driven by a sense of urgency, Junior confronted Menhaz, seeking confirmation of the grim reality depicted in the disturbing images. Menhaz's chilling response confirmed their worst fears, revealing his intention to claim the lives of his remaining family members. Meanwhile, oblivious to the unfolding tragedy, Melissa returned home, greeted by an eerie silence that belied the horror lurking within. Unbeknownst to her, she had walked into a nightmare orchestrated by her own brother. As she ventured further into the house, she fell victim to the same brutal fate that had befallen her mother and grandmother, her life snuffed out by the hands of her own flesh and blood. In the aftermath of his sister's murder, Menhaz callously documented her demise, capturing her lifeless form in a macabre photograph. With chilling detachment, he shared the image with a friend named John, callously recounting the harrowing ordeal as if it were nothing more than a macabre spectacle to be observed and dissected. In a private message to John, Menhaz uttered words of self-condemnation, branding himself as a pathetic coward and a subhuman, consumed by a profound sense of shame and self-loathing. With a macabre sense of detachment, he proceeded to inundate John with a series of grisly photographs, each one more harrowing than the last. Among them was an image of the murder weapon, and even a disturbing selfie featuring Menhaz himself, brandishing a bloodied knife, a grotesque testament to the depths of his depravity. Horrified by the gruesome evidence before him, John wasted no time in sharing these chilling images with the rest of the Discord group, each photo serving as damning proof of Menhaz's heinous crimes. As the community rallied to gather as much evidence as possible against him, Menhaz continued to play the part of the oblivious gamer, biding his time until his father's return. When Manure, Menhaz's father, unwittingly stepped into the trap laid by his own son, he fell victim to the same brutal fate that had befallen the rest of his family. With cold precision, Menhaz launched his final assault, stabbing his father in the neck, before callously capturing the aftermath in yet another chilling photograph. In the wake of his heinous acts, Menhaz grappled with his own demons, acknowledging his cowardice and selfishness in a series of remorseful messages to his online acquaintances. Expressing a warped sense of resignation, he resigned himself to a life behind bars, inviting his friends to bear witness to the grim spectacle he had orchestrated. Amidst the chaos, one Discord user devised a plan to trace Menhaz's location through his IP address, a digital breadcrumb trail that led authorities straight to his doorstep. As the net closed in around him, Menhaz made no attempt to flee, choosing instead to confront the consequences of his actions head-on. 12 agonizing hours after the bloodshed, law enforcement officers descended upon the Zaman residence, their suspicions confirmed by the sight of Menhaz peering down at them from his bedroom window. Surrendering himself to the authorities without resistance, Menhaz offered no protest as he was led away in handcuffs, his stoic demeanor betraying no hint of remorse or regret. Charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, Menhaz stood trial as the weight of his crimes bore down upon him. With the damning evidence amassed by the online gaming community serving as irrefutable proof of his guilt, There remained little doubt as to his ultimate fate. In the end, justice prevailed, but the scars left behind by Menhaz's reign of terror would linger for years to come, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human soul. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. When an obsession transforms a quiet individual into a monster, it parallels many grave addictions akin to severe illnesses with psychological, biological, or social roots. This case involves a destructive habit. Whether it's an urge for alcohol, prohibited substances, gambling, or an obsessive need for a particular activity or interaction with a certain person or group, it's tragic. Addiction affects not just the individual, but also their loved ones who genuinely strive to help. The once prosperous and happy Amato family faced such a dilemma head-on. As all family members were healthcare professionals, they believed they could manage the situation without external assistance. However, by the time they recognized the severity of the issue, it was regrettably too late. This isn't merely a story of addiction, but of a young man's extreme obsession with a woman he had never met in person. Compounded by his addiction to forbidden substances and a pathological inclination towards theft, the situation spiraled into a horrifying outcome. Let's delve into this case to understand if there was any chance to alter the course of events and prevent the tragedy. Bloodshed at the family home occurred on January 25, 2019. A concerned man contacted the Soule County Police in Florida. He reported that his close friend and colleague, Cody Amato, a nurse, unexpectedly didn't show up for his shift at the hospital, which was highly unusual for him. The day before, Cody had left work about 15 minutes early due to some urgent family issues at home. He departed so hastily he even forgot to collect his pay for the day. Attempts to reach the 31-year-old Cody by phone were unsuccessful. He simply wasn't answering. His girlfriend stated that Cody went to his parents' house the previous day at his father's request, but never returned to her place. She too couldn't reach him. All these signs triggered alarming thoughts and prompted the dispatch of police officers to the provided address. The Amato family home, located in a suburb of Orlando, featured a large adjoining area with a stable and a horse-walking area. Cody's car was parked in the driveway, lights were on in several rooms of the house. Everything seemed ordinary at first glance. Doors and windows were intact. When the sheriff's deputy knocked, there was no response. Calls to the landline also went unanswered. The police then sought permission to enter. Upon approval, they cautiously unlocked the back door using a knife to slide the bolt. Inside, an eerie silence pervaded, although the lit rooms suggested someone must be present. Indeed, the homeowners were there. The officers first discovered the lifeless body of 59-year-old Chad Amato, lying on the kitchen floor in a pool of his own blood, with 2 close-range gunshot wounds to his chest. Next, at the staircase opposite the main entrance, they found Cody curled up and also deceased in a massive pool of blood. Lastly, 61-year-old Margaret Amato was found sitting at her computer in the home office. At first glance, she seemed to be napping with her head resting on her arm. However, blood splatters on the monitor and a large spreading stain beneath her head. The murder weapon, an IWE Jericho 941 pistol, was found next to Cody's body and later determined by forensic experts to have his fingerprints on it. There were no signs of break-in or external presence, and nothing appeared missing from the house. Initially, it seemed like Cody might have ended their lives after a family dispute before shooting himself in the chest. However, smeared blood on the front door suggested it was locked by someone leaving after the incident, indicating that the perpetrator wasn't among the deceased family members. Regarding a suspect, those familiar with or connected to the Amato family had little doubt. They pointed to their youngest son, 30-year-old Grant Amato. Grant had been missing since that evening. His car, a white Honda, along with some personal items such as a laptop from his room, were gone, implying that he had taken them with him. Grant was identified as a suspect, prompting a search to locate his whereabouts. Here's what we know about the Amato family. Margaret Amato, née Wade, married Chad Robert Amato in the mid-1990s. Margaret, 2 years older than Chad, was raising a 3-year-old son, Jason, from a marriage. Chad wasn't dissuaded by the fact she had a child. Instead, he embraced Jason as his own. In 1988, they welcomed their first child together, Cody. Their youngest son, Grant Tyan Amato, was born on May 20th, 1989. From childhood, the brothers shared a close bond. Raised in an affluent family environment, they rarely faced adversity. However, to enjoy certain privileges, they had to follow family rules, excel academically, help with chores, and demonstrate good behavior. Their parents held advanced degrees in healthcare. Margaret was a senior operational manager at a reputable private clinic, while Chad initially worked as a clinical pharmacist before transitioning to software specialization. The family's financial status allowed them to live comfortably in a spacious suburban home and indulge in breeding thoroughbred racehorses as a hobby. Jason left home at 18 after finishing high school to attend university and build his own life. He got married and settled down with his family in another state, but maintained close ties with his parents and younger brothers. Cody and Grant were nearly inseparable, attending the same school and joining the same sports teams. They also regularly visited the shooting range on weekends with their father. The Amatos had an impressive firearm collection, featuring rare pieces available only to Chad for safety reasons. Grant was the youngest of the 3 sons, and naturally received much attention and care from everyone due to his frail and sickly nature as a child. This made him grow up shy and modest, finding it challenging to connect with peers outside of his brothers. Grant became particularly close to Cody after Jason grew up and left home following high school graduation. Eventually, both brothers pursued medical degrees and became anesthesiologists. Cody excelled in his studies, becoming the top student in his class. Both managed to land jobs in their field at a hospital. Cody a reputation as a reliable professional, but Grant frequently got into trouble and made errors, often needing his work double-checked. In the summer of 2018, Grant's career at the hospital ended scandalously. He was caught stealing strictly controlled sedatives, which caused euphoria and hallucinations, and were used rarely for anesthesia. The discovery led to police involvement, and Grant was arrested. During interrogation, he admitted to the theft, claiming he administered the drugs to patients who, in his opinion, were under-medicated. Many believed Grant was using or selling the drugs illegally, though there was no direct evidence of this. He was immediately suspended and later fired. His criminal case for theft was eventually dismissed, reportedly due to his parents' intervention. Unemployed and dependent on the internet after losing his job, the 29-year-old man, already a loner, became even more withdrawn. He spent weeks indoors, glued to his computer, mostly browsing adult websites. Grant never had a girlfriend and struggled with social interactions with women, leaving him feeling inadequate. He indulged in viewing adult content and frequently interacted with webcam models on specialized platforms, trying to fill the void of a non-existent personal life. This private interaction naturally came at a cost. Grant easily accessed funds from his parents' and older brothers' accounts for these activities. This obsession quickly spiraled into an addiction compounded by regular alcohol consumption. Yet Grant seemed content with this lifestyle, living off his family and spending their money without contributing anything in return. Eventually, his father issued an ultimatum: find a job soon, or he would have to leave home and lose any financial support from the family. Grant promised his father to resolve the issue but had no real intention of seeking employment. He claimed he would become a streamer, earning by broadcasting video games. Grant's parents, considering it better than nothing, agreed to set up a streaming station for him. In reality, he was locked in his room indulging in his favorite pastime, visiting adult-only websites. In August 2018, Cody took a vacation from work and decided to embark on a journey across the globe for a change of. He dreamed of visiting Japan and invited his younger brother Grant and his best friend Jeremy. While Cody and Jeremy funded their trip independently, Grant's vacation was financed by their parents. However, instead of giving the money directly to Grant, they entrusted it to Cody, who was seen as the more responsible of the two. The trip lasted nearly 2 weeks. Throughout it, Grant seemed disengaged and showed little interest in tours or landmarks. He was constantly fixated on his smartphone screen and often stayed back at the hotel using his brother's laptop. One day when the group went to Lake Kawaguchi near Mount Fuji, Jeremy accidentally left his credit card in their hotel room. Seizing the opportunity, Grant hacked into Jeremy's account and withdrew thousands of dollars. He spent it all on private sessions with his favorite webcam model. Jeremy discovered the theft later, but initially suspected fraud. He couldn't pinpoint the culprit and continued investigating after returning home, unaware that Grant was responsible. About the identity of the mysterious webcam model, who became an obsession for Grant. On a site where he paid for private online interactions with various women, he met Silvia Venizlevova from Bulgaria, known as Silly. She captivated him with her striking looks and confidence. Sylvia's charisma and passion made Grant feel special, loved, desired, and unique. He really thought her feelings for him were genuine. He believed they could have a real relationship. Grant was sure they were together and needed to win over this fiery brunette from all her admirers. He spent hours and thousands of dollars daily to ensure she had no time for other men. Grant also showered her with gifts like expensive lingerie and jewelry, which she wore during their video chats. Desperate to impress Sylvia, Grant constantly fabricated stories and lost touch with reality. He claimed he lived alone in a large house, owned a successful business, and could afford to lavish her with money. To back up his claims, he made money transfers, initially sending a couple thousand, then $10,000, and even $100,000 as a birthday gift. Naturally, Grant's lavish spending did not go unnoticed by his parents, since he was using their accounts. At first, he explained these expenditures as investments in his own online project to attract an audience. But Chad and Margaret quickly realized their son was lying. A serious family dispute erupted at home. The father demanded that the youngest son immediately pack his things and leave. But his mother and Cody intervened on Grant's behalf. The family understood that Grant was suffering from severe internet addiction, but they were baffled about how he had spent nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A thorough search in his room uncovered vials of potent substances. Grant explained he used them to keep from going insane. The parents announced they would cut off his access to their accounts and intended to send him for mandatory treatment for drug and internet addiction. In response, Grant declared he was tired of everything and ready to end his life. He then dashed out of the house, jumped into his car, and sped away at high speed in an unknown direction. Later, it was discovered that Grant went to his aunt and uncle's house, where he crashed through their fence and hit the garage wall. Aware of the turmoil in the Amato family, his relatives sympathized with him and offered him a place to stay until things settled down. He readily agreed, but ended up robbing his kind-hearted relatives instead. The following day, thousands of dollars were stolen from several accounts. The funds were used to pay for interactions with Sylvie. When Grant's aunt informed his parents, they asked her not to involve the police, promising to resolve the issue and return the stolen money promptly. That same day, Chad personally went to their house and took Grant home. Chad, Margaret, and Cody soon realized that reasoning with Grant was futile. If he left home, he would likely commit theft again. They then presented Grant with a stark choice. He could either go to a rehabilitation clinic for treatment of his addictions or face jail time for theft. Reluctantly, Grant agreed to enter the clinic, where he would spend 2 months away from any temptations. He was admitted to the medical institution at the end of December 2018. During his treatment, Grant's parents checked his computer and discovered how he had been spending thousands of dollars daily from their family accounts. They found Sylvie's profile, the woman who had deeply influenced their son, and reviewed their correspondence, finding hundreds of recordings of their private online interactions. These were moments that Grant treasured and often revisited. The Amos family decided to inform Sylvie about her admirer. They revealed that the man who had showered her with money and gifts was not a businessman, but an unemployed individual with drug and internet addictions. They also pointed out that the funds Grant transferred were stolen, potentially subjecting him to criminal charges. However, Sylvie remained indifferent, as for her, it was just a job, and she had no intention of returning the money. On January 5, 2019, just a couple of weeks into his treatment, Grant unexpectedly returned home after completing less than a quarter of the necessary rehabilitation program. He had fled the clinic where he was noted for his lack of compliance. Tearfully vowing to turn his life around and find employment, Grant threatened to end his life if forced back into the rehab center. Grant's parents agreed to give him a chance, but imposed strict rules. He was forbidden from using the computer, had to adhere to a schedule, and his earnings were closely monitored. Additionally, he took up a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse. For about 3 weeks, Grant appeared compliant, leading his parents to believe he had matured and left his behind. However, this changed on Thursday, January 24, 2019. On that day, Grant persuaded his mother to let him use the laptop briefly. He claimed he needed it to check his email and post his resume online in search of a more ambitious job than his current warehouse position. Trusting her son, Margaret allowed him access to the laptop, a decision that proved fatal. Naturally, one of Grant's first actions was to contact Sylvie. To his dismay, he discovered that his parents had already written to her, exposing the truth about him. He perceived this as a betrayal. In Grant's view, they had humiliated him in front of the only woman he loved, and he decided they had to pay for that. Remember the home gun collection previously mentioned? Chad had kept most of it in a special large safe for which no one else had the key. Nonetheless, Grant knew about another gun stored in his parents' bedroom, which was always kept loaded by his father. This was the weapon he decided to use. His mother was sitting at the computer in the home office when Grant approached her quietly from behind and shot her in the back of the head. The position of her body suggested she didn't have time to turn around or understand what was happening. His next target was his father, Chad, who would soon be returning home from work. As soon as Chad entered the kitchen, he was confronted face-to-face with Grant and immediately received 2 bullets to the chest. Grant tensely contemplated his next move and devised an even more monstrous plan. He decided to frame his own brother, Cody. Cody had always stood up for Grant and was considered his best friend. By that time, Cody had moved out of the family home and was living separately with his girlfriend. To carry out his plan, Grant needed to lure Cody back home. Grant, using his now deceased father's phone, sent several messages urging his brother to return home immediately due to an undefined emergency. He didn't provide details, confident that this would prompt a quick response. His assumption proved accurate. Cody left work early and hurried home. Upon entering the house, he barely reached the bottom of the staircase leading to the 2nd floor before being shot and collapsing. Cody didn't die instantly. He realized the gravity of the situation, but was powerless to act. Afterwards, Grant methodically wiped fingerprints off the pistol and placed it in Cody's hand to leave prints, staging the scene to suggest Cody had shot their parents and then himself. The rest of the evening, Grant calmly packed his belongings, downloaded communication files with Sylvie from the computer, and even texted her. Having concluded his tasks, he loaded essentials into his car and drove away. The police quickly tracked Grant down and arrested him at a small roadside motel in Orange County within just over a day. He wasn't surprised but expressed disappointment at being found so quickly while staunchly denying guilt during interrogation. He concocted tales of his father's alleged cruelty toward himself, his mother, and brother. Grant claimed that his father tried to separate him from his girlfriend Sylvie, whom he professed true love for. Regarding the tragic events at their family home on January 24, 2019, Grant's account was confusing and inconsistent. He suggested there had been a fight between his father and brother. According to him, Cody grabbed a gun and killed Chad, with Margaret becoming an accidental victim. He maintained that he could only guess at these events' chronology as he wasn't present himself. He spent the night in his car with his belongings. In the morning, he simply drove away without realizing the tragedy that had occurred at home. His narrative came across as inconsistent and implausible. Furthermore, the evidence indirectly pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Consequently, Grant was arrested as the primary suspect in the triple homicide of his family members. Unable to post a $750,000 bond, he remained in custody, awaiting trial. The trial began on July 15, 2019. Notably, almost all witnesses who testified in court spoke against Grant. This included his older brother Jason, relatives, and Cody's friend Jeremy, from whom Grant had stolen money during their trip to Japan. Those closely acquainted with him described Grant as prone to various addictions, a pathological thief and liar. The main piece of evidence against Grant was a significant bank transfer from Chad's account to Grant's account. This transaction took place late at night when all family members were already deceased. To confirm the transaction, Grant used his deceased father's finger for identification purposes. The prosecution advocated for the death penalty, while his defense argued that Grant was ill and required treatment. On August 12, 2019, a verdict was delivered. The court found 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty of first-degree triple homicide and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Yo, where she had a peaceful upbringing with her parents and older sister. Known for her kindness, positivity, and determination, Lisa decided early on that she wanted to study architecture in Australia. Growing up, she traveled extensively with her family, visiting many countries around the world. As an independent young woman, Lisa worked various part-time jobs since her teenage years to earn her own money. Before the summer of 2015, 17-year-old Lisa secured her first serious job at a cafe located approximately a 40-minute drive from her home. Initially, her parents drove her to work, but after a few weeks, her father decided to purchase a scooter for her. However, during the first few weeks, her father followed her in his scooter to ensure her safety, given her limited experience driving on the roads. As Lisa only worked on weekends, her father accompanied her every morning and evening during this period. This went on until June 7th, when he finally let her drive to the cafe alone. Somewhere around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together that day. The cafe was pretty crowded, so Lisa was really busy with work. She took a short break for lunch, had a snack with her parents, and they went back home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father informing him that she was leaving work. However, just 3 minutes later, her father received a call from her. When he answered the phone, there was no response from the other end. Instead, he could hear some indistinct voices in the background, leading him to believe that Lisa had accidentally dialed his number. He assumed she was engaged in a conversation with her colleagues. Additionally, he heard the sound of a scooter door being closed forcefully. He repeatedly called out Lisa's name, but there was still no answer. Eventually, he ended the call and began waiting for Lisa to arrive home. However, she never showed up. An hour passed, and Lisa's parents started to worry. She should have arrived by now, so her father immediately thought something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding alone on the scooter, and he was deeply concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was off. After waiting a few more minutes, her father decided to hit the road, hoping to meet her along the way since Lisa should have taken the shortest route. The father, concerned that Lisa might have met with an accident, drove slowly, meticulously examining the road, but couldn't find her anywhere. He reached the cafe without any success in locating his daughter. As he arrived at her workplace, he noticed Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By this point, the man was already panic-stricken, having failed to find her along the entire route. The sight of her scooter provided immediate relief, making him think that she might have been held up at work for some reason. However, the cafe was empty, and he noticed something unusual. Lisa's scooter keys were still in the ignition, with her helmet hanging from the handle. This observation led him to suspect that something unfortunate might have happened to his daughter, as she would never carelessly leave the keys in the scooter and abandon it unattended in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner in hopes of shedding light on her daughter's whereabouts, but the woman claimed to have no idea where she could have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they said they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got into her scooter and headed there. On the way, she called 4 of her friends who lived nearby and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, they, along with Lisa's father, began searching both the establishment itself and the surrounding area. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of the scooter. They checked the schedule, and her mother, along with Lisa's older sister, drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, this version was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus, so her relatives immediately contacted the police by that time. It was almost 1 p.m. and it had already gotten dark outside. The police immediately launched extensive searches. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys led them to consider the possibility of abduction. Cases like this are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, the police immediately dispatched several groups with search dogs, while other officers began knocking on every house located near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and her friends learned about her disappearance, they began spreading information about it on social media, hoping to attract more attention and possibly find some witnesses. The search continued all night, but it yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police publicly announced Lisa's disappearance and urged anyone with useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man working in a barn directly opposite the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. The investigators had already inspected this barn on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, but had not noticed the glove there. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that the glove did indeed belong to their daughter. This further substantiated the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional resources for the search. By then, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread nationwide, and hundreds of volunteers had joined the search effort. On Tuesday, the police received several more disturbing clues. Volunteers searched the area along a dirt road located a short distance from the cafe. There, they discovered a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a shattered smartphone screen. Investigators quickly determined that all of these items belonged to Lisa and concentrated their search in that vicinity. Soon after, they found additional pieces of the broken smartphone, Lisa's identification, and more receipts. All of these items were dispersed along the same dirt road. After the discovery of evidence, the police were almost certain that Lisa had been abducted. They put everything into the search, and more people joined with each passing day. The case became the biggest news in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers poured in from all over the country. A local organization specializing in finding missing persons also joined in. The search effort for Lisa became the largest in the country's modern history, with over 1,000 participants in total. The police also received numerous calls with leads. One woman reported that she went out for a run the day before Lisa's disappearance. At one point, a man standing next to his scooter stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke to her in English and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the way on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get in his scooter and show him the route on his navigator. The woman found this request quite suspicious, so she refused and continued running. She also shared an interesting detail with the police. The woman believed she had seen this man among the workers who were repairing the same barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's colleagues also shared one observation. On the day of her disappearance, one of the witnesses noticed 2 men standing across the road from the cafe, looking towards the establishment. She didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa's disappearance, she decided to share this fact with the police. The next morning on Wednesday, Lisa's father, along with some friends, went to search the dirt road where her belongings were found. Walking a bit further, he made several more alarming discoveries. He found Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. It all seemed as if Lisa was being taken along this road away from the cafe, while the abductor was throwing her belongings out of their scooter or other vehicle they used to kidnap her. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on this area, but no other items were found. That same evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from the search. Passing by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. The man decided to go inside and look for any other clues once more. He grabbed a flashlight from his scooter, as it was already getting dark outside, and walked around the premises for several minutes until something shiny on the floor caught his attention. When he looked closer, he saw a woman's earring and another one just like it nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that the earrings belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and searched it more thoroughly. The lead detective later explained that on the first day of Lisa's search, their main focus was on finding the girl herself, so the barn was not inspected as thoroughly. They might have missed such small items as earrings, but now they brought in numerous forensic experts along with search dogs. This time, they spotted an odd clue behind a wall: human poop. Forensic experts say when crooks do terrible crimes, their body makes lots of adrenaline, sometimes making them need to go real bad. Like killers often wet themselves before or during the murder. Since Lisa's stuff was in the barn, cops think the perp might have took her there. So, they reckon this person, all hopped up on adrenaline, and couldn't hold it. The poop got sent off for DNA testing. On Friday, the search area was expanded and volunteers reached a farm about 3 kilometers from the cafe. It was a facility with several large buildings where many people worked. The search team decided to inspect all the buildings. Shortly after arriving, 2 English-speaking men showed up. One claimed that the police had already searched the farm, but the team leader doubted this and continued the search. The men observed the volunteers for a while before driving away. The other day, the search team found a pile of wood behind the cowshed. Underneath, they found a helmet, a coat, and a motorcycle headset. The police arrived on site and confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa. They sent police experts to conduct a more extensive search of the farm. Detectives also heard stories about 2 strange men who had tried to discourage volunteers from inspecting the farm. The police also recalled the story of a woman who had met a suspicious man while she was jogging. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm together with the volunteers. They continued to inspect this area, and soon their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and looked as if it hadn't been used in many years. But next to its door, the grass was flattened as if something had been lying there recently. Some of the grass was also trapped under the door, indicating that it had been recently opened. As soon as the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately met with a strong smell of decay. Inside the trailer, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it was once used as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, leading the experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each locker and eventually saw that Lisa's body was actually in one that was left open, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator managed to fit their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape over her head. Her pants were pulled down and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa died from strangulation. However, they found no signs of sexual assault. All of her clothing was handed over to the lab, while news of the discovery of her body rapidly spread throughout the country. All this time, the news of Lisa's abduction dominated headlines in Sweden. When her body was found and the public learned of Lisa's brutal murder, the case shook the entire country. Such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden, and people were shocked that someone could commit such a heinous act. The Lisa body been discover, something way day eerie happen. YouTube users come see one video we dem post 13 days before the murder. The video name na 13, and he get countdown timer. The name of the channel we post them sef they worry people, them call him Lisa home. News of the video spread well, people come they surprised. Some people talk say somebody don't predict the murder, but no be so. Now just be like say, person change the channel name and video title after them find Lisa body. Maybe the person just wants start a notatory or they play wicked prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything in their power to find the killer as quickly as possible. At the time of Lisa's discovery, investigators had already brought in 2 brothers and a woman, and they all denied any involvement in the murder. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they were at home, providing alibis for each other. According to their accounts, the older brother, Narus, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Narus also added that around 8 p.m. he woke up and went to the gas station, where he bought pizza and cigarettes. The police were pretty skeptical of their alibis, as all 3 could have simply been covering for each other. They collected their DNA samples, but investigators still lacked any evidence directly linking any of them to the murder. However, this didn't last long. Forensic experts were working in the barn and on the farm, using all their resources and manpower, and their efforts soon paid off. In the barn, there was a small office-like room with a large window overlooking the cafe. While examining this room, experts found 15 traces of semen from men on the walls near the window and on the floor. It seemed as if someone had stood there, watched the cafe staff, including Lisa, and pleasured himself. The semen samples were immediately sent to the laboratory, and experts quickly extracted DNA profiles from them. All 15 semen traces matched the DNA of 35-year-old brother Narus. The same was true for the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of this strip perfectly matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on this pipe, and the DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Narus. On the floor beneath the pipe, they discovered a piece of the same rope. Experts examined it and identified 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Narus's. This was a significant breakthrough for the police. It finally linked the man to the rope used to kill the victim. Furthermore, a hair belonging to Lisa was found on the floor of this room. Another crucial piece of evidence came from her jacket. DNA traces belonging to Narus were also found on it. Based on this evidence, the police believed that she was killed right there. They pieced together an approximate sequence of events. Narus had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he could have asked Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactics. Then, Narus might have asked her to get into his scooter to enter the route into the GPS system. Considering Lisa was kind-hearted and always tried to help others, she might have agreed. Once she was in the scooter, the perpetrator taped her mouth shut and drove her to the barn. There, he wrapped the rope around her neck and hung her from the pipe. According to the medical experts, this sight likely excited him so much that he defecated on the floor due to an adrenaline rush. When she died, he placed Lisa's body in the scooter and drove to the farm, tossing her belongings out the window along the way. There, he hid the body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. All of this, from the moment of the abduction, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Narus continued to insist on his innocence. His wife and younger brother had to be released because there was nothing against them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to their homeland, Lithuania. The preparation for the trial was intense. Narus just claimed he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting his DNA could have been present there due to his job. Additionally, he had an alibi provided by his wife and brother, although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both sources. In court, this could have definitely worked in his favor. On the other hand, the presence of Naris's DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact with her on the day of the murder. The police also found a witness who saw his scooter near the cafe shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to them, the scooter passed along the road between the cafe and the farm several times at the same time when Naris was supposed to be sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. For several months after the discovery of her body, experts continued to examine all the available evidence using the most advanced equipment. Eventually, they uncovered traces of Naris's DNA on almost all of Lisa's clothing, including the inside of her underwear. Considering that the whole country was still following the case, investigators continued to search for any other useful clues that could impact the legal process and further prove Naris's involvement. They even went to Lithuania to speak with his wife and brother once again. The woman continued to insist that he did not leave the house between 6 and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives suddenly got what they wanted. After telling him about all the evidence against his brother and detailing what he did with the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell them everything. He claimed that Naris actually was not at home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt and immediately threw all his clothes into the washing machine. When the police started to question all the residents and reached their house, Naris whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Naris explained that he was afraid he would be framed for a crime he didn't commit because he was an immigrant and had no alibi for the time of the abduction. The younger brother truly believed that his relative had nothing to do with it, but after hearing about all the evidence, he realized it wasn't the case. Lisa's funeral took place only a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only accommodate 130 people, but there were many more who came to say goodbye to her. Organizers even decided to set up benches and large screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. This case once again captured the attention of the entire country, so everyone involved in the process was under tremendous pressure. None of them had the right to make a mistake. Naris's lawyer insisted that his client's DNA could have ended up on the victim's clothing because he had worked in the barn. The prosecution, however, pointed out that this version made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there was if he touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer couldn't provide any other solid facts pointing to his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to push the version that the real murderer was Naris's younger brother. According to this theory, the brother somehow took multiple samples of Naris's DNA and placed them on the victim's body as well as at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain the possibility of such manipulations with the DNA. The trial lasted for a month, and Naris was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security prison. Given that this is Sweden we're talking about, the facility resembled more of a decent 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict. In early 2017, Naris himself applied for deportation and was transferred to a prison in his homeland, although Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than Swedish ones. The reasons for this decision were unknown at the time. The court decided to approve his request, despite the fact that providing comfortable conditions of detention cost Swedish taxpayers several hundred per day for each individual inmate. Later that same year, his motives became clear when he appealed to a Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, the joy was short-lived for the murderer, as a few weeks later, the court overturned its decision, and Naris was once again destined to spend his entire life in prison. Only now he had no chance of returning to the comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Naris faced yet another downside of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Naris with a shank. he suffered serious injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, the question of her involvement is still not entirely ruled out. Police noted that there is practically no chance of her direct involvement in the abduction or murder, as experts would have found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew of her husband's crime and helped him evade justice by providing a false alibi. Naris's younger brother also raises questions. Cafe employees reported seeing two men standing near the barn and watching them. Considering that one of them was likely Naris himself, the second should have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found either in the barn itself or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. Perhaps they were indeed observing the young employees with the older brother and even discussing inappropriate things, but only Naris decided to commit such a heinous crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jayden Parkinson. Jayden Parkinson was born in the UK on September 26, 1996, as the youngest of three children in a family troubled by her parents' tumultuous relationship. According to her mother, Samantha Shuri, Jayden and her siblings witnessed many unpleasant incidents. When Jayden was just 7 years old, her parents divorced and she went to live with her father. Despite the physical distance, she remained extremely close to her mother, with whom she would talk every night over the phone, even though they lived in different places. As Jayden entered her teenage years, her life became increasingly unstable. According to Samantha, Jayden's father gave her too much freedom, allowing her to do as she pleased. As a result, she got involved with a group of people where she started smoking and drinking alcohol regularly. During this time, she alternated between living with her father and her mother. At the age of 13, she ran away from home and went to live with her mother, claiming she preferred to stay with her. In the end, the family court ruled in favor of Jayden, allowing her to remain with her mother. Jayden experienced numerous conflicts with various individuals at school, including her teachers. She resented being told what to do and having her behavior controlled. In her personal life, she was in a romantic relationship with Ben Blakely. Jayden was only 14 years old when she met Blakely, a former garbage collector. Although they didn't cohabitate since she was still a minor, he persisted in his efforts to influence her, gradually bringing about significant changes in her. Jayden was 15 when she began dating Ben, who was 20 at the time. The significant age gap understandably concerned Jayden's mother, but she was powerless to intervene. Initially, their relationship was loving and romantic, but it eventually deteriorated. The mutual understanding and affection they once shared vanished, replaced by tension and strain. Ben exerted control over every aspect of Jayden's life, dictating her appearance, from makeup to clothing choices. He isolated her from family and friends, causing Jayden to move out of her mother's house and into a hostel for women escaping domestic violence. Ben was banned from visiting the hostel, but that didn't stop him from exerting total control over her life. The couple frequently clashed, and Jayden even alerted the hostel staff that Ben had a history of aggression towards her. She was unable to make a move without his approval. Ben took her mobile phone away, convincing her that she didn't need anything or anyone else as long as she had him and his love. He prohibited her from interacting with men and monitored all her social media activity. As a result, she stopped going to school. Ben's grip on her was so tight that he even refused to let her leave her room to use the bathroom. Jayden used to have daily phone conversations with her mother, but nowadays, they barely talk once or twice a month. Samantha begged her daughter to come back home and break up with Ben, but Jayden refused to listen. The reality was that Ben had a tight grip on Jayden, controlling her both emotionally and physically. There were even times when she had visible bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jayden revealed to her mother that she was pregnant, hoping the news would prompt Ben to reform his attitude towards her and his lifestyle. She believed the baby would bring them closer together, and Ben would revert to the person he was when they first met. However, Ben failed to meet her expectations. As he often did, Ben manipulated Jayden into isolating herself from friends and family, making her dependent on him alone. Without her own financial means, Jayden lost autonomy, with Ben eventually restricting her from leaving her room, even to use the bathroom. Unbeknownst to Jayden, Ben secretly dated other girls, exerting psychological and physical control over them as well. When Samantha found out her daughter Jayden was pregnant, she asked her to come back home, but Jayden refused. They had a meeting to talk it over, but Jayden was determined. She didn't want to cause her mother any more stress. After Jayden told Ben about her pregnancy, he flew into a rage and denied being the father of her baby. He even threatened to share naked photos and videos of Jayden on social media. A few days prior to her disappearance, Jayden reported Ben to the authorities, fearing he would share intimate photos and videos of her online. Ben possessed approximately 30 compromising photos and 13 explicit videos of Jayden, and she was desperate to prevent their public release. On December 3rd, Jayden failed to return to the hostel overnight, prompting the staff to launch a search effort, aware of the turmoil in her personal life. They contacted Samantha, Jayden's mother, by phone, but she was unable to provide any information about her daughter's whereabouts. Shortly after midnight on December 4th, 2013, the police received a formal missing persons report. After learning about Jayden's personal struggles, investigators attempted to reach out to Ben to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, Ben was hostile and abruptly ended multiple calls, claiming he couldn't assist and had no idea where Jayden might be. Jayden had a troubled upbringing, marked by frequent conflicts with her family, and had a history of running away only to return home. As a result, her disappearance didn't initially seem out of the ordinary. On December 4th, the day the investigation started, police arrested Ben Blakely in the early hours, but this was not related to Jayden's disappearance. A few days earlier, Jayden had reported about Ben to the police, fearing he would post intimate photos of her online. Ben was arrested due to this incident. During his interrogation, the investigators did not know that Ben was a person of interest in Jayden Parkinson's disappearance case. Ben denied any intentions of posting Jayden's images online and was released on bail the same day. Samantha was distributing flyers featuring a picture of her daughter, Jayden, in an effort to gather information about her disappearance. She also utilized social media platforms to raise awareness about the case, hoping that someone might have witnessed something or possess knowledge about Jayden's whereabouts. While the investigation was ongoing, the police examined surveillance footage to determine Jayden's last known whereabouts. After retrieving CCTV footage from the hostel where Jayden lived, they found that she had departed to meet Ben but did not come back. This event took place on December 3rd. Additionally, Jayden was later spotted at Oxford railway station, where CCTV footage showed her walking in with Ben, and nothing out of the ordinary occurred in the video. Following their trail, investigators discovered that Ben and Jayden took a train to Didcot, a town roughly 10 miles from Oxford. The last confirmed sighting of Jayden was at Didcot train station. Surveillance footage captured the pair leaving the station. Typically, when Jayden ran away from home, she would reach out to a family member within a day or two to let them know she was safe. But this time, there was an eerie silence. As the days went by, Jayden failed to contact her family, friends, or post on social media, a stark departure from her usual behavior. Since the CCTV footage showed her boarding a train with Ben, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police did not doubt that Ben knew where Jayden was and what had happened to her. The footage showed Ben returning to the train station alone, yet no one saw Jayden alive ever again. A week after Jayden's disappearance, on December 10th, 2013, the police took Ben Blakely into custody. They wanted to question him to determine what happened to Jayden after they were last seen together leaving the train station in Didcot. At the time, the police considered two possible scenarios. One, that Jayden was hiding of her own free will, and two, that Ben was holding her captive against her will at an unknown location. Ben displayed confidence during the interrogation. He claimed to be unaware of his ex-girlfriend's whereabouts, identifying her as Jayden. According to Ben, they had broken up, and she was now seeing another man. He suggested that the police should focus on speaking with this new boyfriend. Ben expressed his indifference to Jayden's current situation, stating that he had moved on and had a new girlfriend. He recommended that the police check her social media to determine her location and the people she was interacting with. Ben Blakely was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murdering Jayden, who was still missing. The police spoke to Jayden's friends to see if they knew of anywhere she might have gone, but their investigation only revealed that Jayden had drifted apart from her friends after starting a relationship with Ben. As a result, no one was aware of a potential hiding place for her. During the ongoing search for Jayden, investigators received crucial information from a taxi driver from Didcot. He said that at about 1 a.m. on December 4th, he picked up a passenger on a dirt road. He described the passenger as a young man with a large and heavy suitcase smeared with mud. The driver couldn't lift it and asked the taxi driver to help him. These circumstances made the taxi driver think about what was in the suitcase and that he could have witnessed a crime. The police investigation revealed that the taxi was summoned using Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When questioned further, Ben refused to provide any additional information. A detailed analysis of his mobile phone's location records showed that Ben had visited several sites in Didcot, including an abandoned countryside barn, which was where a taxi collected him that evening. A team of investigators, including criminologists and dog handlers, was sent to the location to conduct an investigation. It later emerged that Ben and Jayden had previously visited the area because Jayden's mother resided in Didcot, adjacent to the barn. The police discovered a bracelet that resembled the one Jayden was wearing. Trained service dogs, specialized in detecting deceased bodies, began barking inside the barn, suggesting that something was amiss, but Jayden's body was not found. This development likely had a connection to the suitcase Ben had with him when he got into the taxi. The police appealed for public assistance, requesting that anyone who saw a man carrying a large suitcase in the Didcot countryside come forward with information. Meanwhile, officers visited homes door to door and questioned residents of the houses nearest to the abandoned barn. Since the train station video footage showed Ben and Jayden were not carrying a suitcase, investigators sought to determine where Ben acquired the suitcase. On December 14th, the police finally found the answer to their question. During their investigation, they discovered that Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned barn. When the police visited Ben's grandmother, the first thing she asked was if they were there about the suitcase. She explained that Ben had borrowed a suitcase from her a few days earlier, arriving in a hurry and dumping its contents on the floor without explanation. According to Ben's grandmother, he returned the suitcase 2 days later and discarded it in the barn, but it was dirty when he did so. Additionally, she mentioned that 2 shovels had gone missing, only to reappear later, covered in a thick layer of dirt. Ben's need for 2 shovels raises suspicions that he may have had an accomplice. A possible partner in crime is 17-year-old Jake Blakely, a friend of Jayden's who met Ben through their mutual friend. Several witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake together, riding dirt bikes. As the investigation into Jayden's disappearance unfolded, Jake was arrested on suspicion of being involved in the crime. Meanwhile, the police sent the suitcase Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn to a laboratory for analysis, hoping to determine if it contained any traces of Jayden's DNA. Based on all available evidence, investigators developed a theory that Jayden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in a suitcase and moved to another location where the perpetrator buried her. However, due to the vast area of fields surrounding Didcot, finding Jayden's body was a daunting task. To aid in the investigation, police utilized aviation to narrow down the likely burial site. Through aerial photography, they identified 10 locations with recent significant changes to the soil surface. Although police checked several locations, it yielded no results. It wasn't until they thoroughly investigated all 10 places of interest that they finally found Jaden's body. A surprising development emerged in the case. Jake Blakely began working with the police, directing them to investigate his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, adjacent to All Saints Church. Although the cemetery was one of 10 locations that had recently shown surface changes, it was initially considered a low priority since soil disturbances are common in such places. However, upon receiving a note from Jake suggesting that Jaden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave, the police promptly cordoned off the cemetery. Investigators were shocked by this unprecedented method of hiding a victim's body. According to reports from the English press, Ben and Jake's uncle had been buried in 2006. The new twist in this case has garnered widespread media attention. In a shocking first for the country, the victim's body was discovered in a pre-existing grave. Following the setup of a forensic tent at the cemetery, experts commenced their investigation. Tragically, Jaden's family later received the devastating news that her body had been found in the grave of Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle. She was found naked, with no clothes nearby, and her jewelry had been removed. The forensic examination revealed that Jaden had been beaten prior to her death, with finger marks on her neck indicating strangulation. The pathologist ultimately determined asphyxia to be the official cause of death. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely had a change of heart after speaking with the prison chaplain. He and his lawyer drafted a letter in which he accepted responsibility for Jaden's death, but claimed it was not premeditated. Ben's account of events was that he got into an argument with Jaden, pushed her, and she fell off a bridge near an abandoned barn. He said he tried to revive her, but was unsuccessful. Initially, he buried her body in one location, then moved it to the cemetery and reburied it in his uncle's grave. However, the autopsy results contradicted Ben's story, revealing blunt force injuries to her face and asphyxia as the cause of death, which suggested Ben was not telling the truth in an attempt to shift some of the blame. Jaden's father passed away due to heart problems before the trial commenced. On June 23, 2014, Ben Blakely appeared in court, displaying no remorse for his actions. His provocative behavior and insults towards others made it clear that he was unbothered by the fact that he had taken the life of Jaden and her unborn child. During the 4-week trial, it emerged that Blakely, of Reading Berks, was a violent and controlling boyfriend. 3 of his former girlfriends testified against him, revealing that he was controlling and violent towards them during their relationships. They alleged that he would confiscate their phones, physically assault them, and even grab them by the throat if they dared to answer back, or if he suspected them of cheating on him. The short-tempered, ginger-haired murderer's outbursts were evident throughout the trial. The judge repeatedly warned him for using foul language in the dock and while on the witness stand, where he continuously shouted at prosecutor Richard Leam and used profanities. His fits of rage were too overwhelming for Jaden's mother and other relatives, who were forced to leave the courtroom in tears on several occasions. Judge Patrick Eccles even had to remove Ben from the courtroom one day, sending him to the cells, and continued the trial in his absence. Although Jake Blakely is under 18, Judge Eccles decided to allow his name to be reported in the media because he believed it was important for the public to know. Jake has admitted to perverting the course of justice, but claims he thought he was burying either weapons or dead animals at the time. His sibling Ben had promised to give him an Xbox game console and £100 if he carried out the malicious act. The jury viewed CCTV footage that showed Ben and Jaden entering an Oxford train station and boarding a train to Didcot. The footage also revealed Blakely returning alone, looking down in an apparent attempt to conceal his face. According to the prosecutor, The crime was premeditated. The argument is that Blakely deliberately lured Jayden to a secluded location, an abandoned barn in another town, where he could take her life without being seen. What other plausible reason could there be for him to take Jayden to such a location after discovering she was pregnant? Jayden was eager to start anew, but Blakely had grown accustomed to controlling every facet of her life and would not relinquish his grip. Moreover, he was unwilling to become a father. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before reaching a verdict, with 11 out of 12 members agreeing. Ben Blakely was found guilty of intentionally taking Jayden Parkinson's life. According to the judge, Jayden finally found the courage to end the relationship in November last year, but Ben Blakely responded by threatening to post intimate photographs online to humiliate her. In an unrelated case, the court had previously sentenced Jake Blakely, Ben's younger brother, to 3 years in prison for perverting the course of justice in July 2014. Ben Blakely, on the other hand, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon, born in 1994, was a lively child who spread joy wherever she went. Her infectious laughter and humor brought delight to those around her, often with her quick wit and impressive impersonations. She loved taking leisurely strolls around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring, proudly showing it off to everyone. From a young age, Mary had a deep appreciation for nature and animals, spending hours exploring the outdoors and marveling at the beauty of the natural world. Aside from being an entertainment enthusiast, Mary had a passion for performing. She would often stage plays for her family, captivating them with her creativity and boundless imagination. As she grew older, Mary was introduced to firearms and developed a strong interest in them. She learned the importance of handling guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Over time, her skills improved and she became an accomplished marksman with a growing passion for guns. Mary Catherine met her soulmate, Stephen Freeman, in high school. Born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, Stephen grew up in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. He was a happy child with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen's family was very important to him, especially his mother, with whom he shared a special bond. He loved spending time outdoors, enjoying activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Mary Catherine and Stephen quickly formed a strong connection in high school, united by their shared passion for the outdoors. Their love for nature brought them together, and their relationship flourished as they explored the great outdoors, whether hiking, camping, fishing, or hunting. This connection served as the foundation of their deep and enduring relationship. Mary Catherine and Stephen's high school graduation marked the start of a new era in their lives as a couple. They decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving in together in a house in Griffin, Georgia. The couple was ecstatic about having their own space and starting a new life. Mary Catherine had become an integral part of Stephen's family, with his mother treating her like a daughter. She welcomed Mary Catherine into their family with open arms, and the couple felt grateful for her love and support. Every Sunday, Mary Catherine and Stephen would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner. This weekly tradition brought the family closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within it. Over time, Stephen's friends also grew to appreciate Mary Catherine. Initially, they had reservations about the couple's relationship, but as they spent more time together, they realized how well-suited the pair were. They admired how Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life and shared his passion for the outdoors. Stephen, a metal worker, repaired roofs. His wife, Mary Catherine, had 2 jobs, part-time teacher's assistant and sales at a sporting goods store, where she learned gun safety from coworker Thomas Skinner. This complemented Stephen's passion for firearms as an avid hunter and target shooter with multiple guns, including a Glock 42 at home for protection. By summer 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been in a 5-year relationship in Griffin, Georgia. Tragically, it came to an end on August 1st. That day, Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call, screaming that she had accidentally shot Stephen. When police arrived at their apartment, they found Mary Catherine in a state of distress, crying and hyperventilating over Stephen's motionless body. Despite his still being alive with a chest wound, Mary Catherine was screaming that she couldn't lose him. An ambulance rushed Stephen to the hospital, where doctors made efforts to save his life. But unfortunately, he eventually succumbed to his injuries. Mary Catherine visited the police station to explain the shooting incident. She claimed that she had accidentally shot Stephen while handing him a gun, which he normally kept beside his bed for protection. However, the police officers detected the smell of alcohol on her breath and noticed discrepancies in her account, which shifted from handing the gun to tossing it. The police were skeptical, knowing that a tossed gun would not fire on its own, and the nature of the wound suggested that Mary Catherine had deliberately pointed the gun at Stephen. During the interview, Mary Catherine eventually confessed that she had acted out of anger. Although the police had recorded the interview, there was only feedback during the crucial moment when she admitted to shooting Stephen out of anger. Nevertheless, despite the missing recording, the police were convinced that they had collected sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. At the apartment of Mary Catherine and Stephen, police found evidence of a heated argument before Stephen was shot. Scattered food suggested a prior altercation. This was the 6th time police had been called to the residence in the past year due to domestic disturbances. Despite Mary Catherine's claims, the gun used in the shooting was found to have been loaded that night. Traces of grease on the gun and magazine led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon after shooting Stephen. Stephen's friends told police their relationship was marked by frequent arguments, possessiveness, and verbal abuse from Mary Catherine. Friends saw her as mentally unstable, causing tension. When Stephen tried to distance himself, she'd bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed Mary Catherine pulled a gun on Stephen multiple times, but he didn't report it, fearing trouble for her. Stephen's friends were stunned when they learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, especially since they knew she was familiar with firearms. However, what they were unaware of was that 3 months earlier, Stephen had confided in a friend that Mary Catherine had a disturbing episode where she ran around outside, screaming at the top of her lungs, and even attempted to shoot both him and herself. Furthermore, just a month before the incident, Stephen had shared with another friend that although Mary Catherine had previously threatened him with a gun, this time her eyes had a look that genuinely terrified him, making him believe she might actually carry out her threat. Stephen's friends told police he'd been tired of Mary Catherine's behavior and planned to leave her after 7 years. He intended to move away without telling her, fearing her reaction. On July 30th, 2018, Stephen sent Mary Catherine a friendly text, but the next night, he ignored her calls and texts after a fight. Mary Catherine was cooking dinner when she noticed Stephen was missing. She called his mom, who said he was with a friend. Enraged, Mary Catherine drove to the friend's house to confront him. When she arrived, she saw Stephen in the truck and began yelling at him. He tried to calm her down, saying he was heading home. Stephen's friend said Mary Catherine pulled a gun on him multiple times, but she denied it. She admitted threatening suicide with a gun, though. His mom believed Mary Catherine's threats kept Stephen from leaving, fearing she'd harm herself if he did. Mary Catherine said Stephen escalated the situation, becoming violent, throwing dinner in her face. She claimed self-defense, grabbing a gun to scare him off, but he lunged at her, and as she backed away, she saw he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't share her account of events with the police because she was too embarrassed to reveal that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. including hitting her in the past and being controlling. In fact, she claimed that on one occasion, he kicked her out of bed so forcefully that her head hit the door frame. However, Stephen's friends described their relationship differently, saying they had seen Mary Catherine hit Stephen, including an incident where she slapped him hard in the face. By contrast, Mary Catherine's sister offered a different view, stating that 2 weeks before the shooting, she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm. Mary Catherine's sister said Mary Catherine confided in her about Stephen's physical attack. The police investigation found Stephen's death was a murder. Mary Catherine was arrested and charged with murder and other crimes. She refused a plea deal and chose to go to trial, claiming she shot Stephen in self-defense to protect herself from his aggression. A year after Stephen's death, Mary Catherine's trial began, revealing the tumultuous nature of their relationship. Her defense team argued that she acted in self-defense, citing Stephen's history of aggressive and abusive behavior as justification for her actions. To support their claim, they presented evidence to the jury that demonstrated Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous nature, which had led Mary Catherine to fear for her safety. Mary Catherine testified tearfully about years of abuse by Stephen, recounting a disturbing pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual mistreatment. She described his attacks, belittling, and disregard for her humanity, saying his abuse knew no bounds, leaving her trapped and terrified. Mary Catherine's defense presented a text from Stephen, saying he'd punish her when he got home. Mary Catherine testified that meant physical abuse, and if she defended herself, he'd hit her harder. Another text shown in court read, "Don't hit me, or I'll hit you back 2 times harder." Mary Catherine testified that Stephen had a red room, like in 50 Shades of Grey, where they had aggressive and violent sex. She provided a text from Stephen saying, "You're going to the red room," to back her claim. Mary Catherine also alleged Stephen assaulted her twice, once after a Disney World trip, saying she felt uncomfortable with their increasingly aggressive sex and asked him to stop. But he intensified his efforts, claiming she owed him for gifts. The defense presented text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's abuse claims. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and showed a pattern of verbal assaults. Over 60 pages of messages showcased Stephen's abuse, including one disturbing message where he held a dead fish, captioned, "This is you." Another message presented to the court was one from Stephen after Mary Catherine cheated on him, in which he wrote that he was going to wreck her for wrecking him. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Stephen had a drug and alcohol addiction that contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine said she broke up with Stephen, not the other way around. She claimed he got angry and threatened her, so she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Her last words to him before firing were, "Get out of my house." Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's claims that he was violent and abusive, knowing him as friendly and caring. His mom denied knowledge of disturbing texts and threats, but claimed he only said hurtful things out of anger. Mary Catherine was questioned about not reporting Stephen's alleged abuse. The state also pointed out she searched for violent, explicit images online hours before the shooting, claiming she did it to please Stephen. The state argued she'd changed her story about the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview. Evidence in court included a text from Stephen to Mary Catherine, saying she'd previously pointed a gun at him, and his friends testified about witnessing her abuse towards him, supporting the state's claim that she was violent towards him, not the other way around. Jurors deliberated for 4 hours before acquitting Mary Catherine of malice murder, felony murder, and lesser charges. Shocked family and friends expected a guilty verdict, but jurors later revealed they believed Mary Catherine intentionally killed Stephen. However, they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt due to lack of evidence, making it hard to distinguish murder from self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to Lisa and Jay Poston. He had a strong and loving bond with his three sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth, throughout his life. Growing up, Ryan had the opportunity to travel extensively and attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. This exposure broadened his horizons and gave him an adventurous spirit. Ryan was also known for his striking good looks, which, coupled with his charismatic personality, made him stand out in a crowd. After graduating from high school, Ryan attended Indiana University, where he earned a degree in political science, history, and geography. He excelled academically and graduated with honors in 2005. Following in the footsteps of his family members, Ryan pursued a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Driven by his admiration for the legal profession, his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys, were his role models. Ryan's ultimate goal was to own a successful law firm. While in Cincinnati, Ohio, Ryan dedicated himself to helping people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Despite being young, he had already built a strong reputation, and many sought his advice. He worked hard to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of their financial situation. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin Carissa for comfort and support. During a visit to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her, he met Shayna Hubers, a Lexington native, and his life took an unexpected turn. Shayna Hubers embodied the quintessential Southern girl, renowned for her outgoing personality and effortless ability to form friendships. Her warm and charming demeanor naturally drew people to her. After graduating high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she continued her education at the University of Kentucky, majoring in psychology, before pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their 8-year age gap, Ryan was 29, while Shayna was just 21. Their feelings for each other grew increasingly undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to see his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself devoting more time to Shayna. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Shayna began spending more time in Highland Heights, the Kentucky suburb where Ryan lived. Every weekend, she would pack a bag and visit Ryan's home, dedicating herself to taking care of him, cooking his meals, and cleaning his living space. As time went on, Ryan and Shayna's relationship grew stronger, and he took her to meet his parents. She was over the moon with excitement, telling her friends all about Ryan and even saying she wanted to become Mrs. Ryan Poston. But their promising future came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. In a panicked call to the police, Shayna admitted to fatally shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared revealed a devastating scene of domestic violence that had spun out of control. According to Shayna, Ryan had tried to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she attempted to gather her belongings. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan had confronted her with a gun, leading to a physical fight. In the heat of the moment, Shayna managed to grab the gun, but she was intimidated by Ryan's size. In a state of panic, she pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. Shayna admitted that she believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she claimed she wanted to end his suffering. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan was in distress, making unusual sounds, which motivated her to shoot him several more times. Afterwards, she revealed that she left the gun on a bookshelf. Minutes after Shayna called 911 to report that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were sent to the scene. When they arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually followed their orders. As she walked out, they told her to lie face down on the ground. It was clear that Shayna was very upset as she complied with their instructions. After the officers handcuffed Shayna and put her in the back of their patrol car, they entered the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and examined Ryan's condo, which looked a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. They found that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic gun that Shayna used to shoot him. Based on the evidence they gathered, the investigators concluded that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna opened fire. They knew this because of the blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were not disturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Ryan's apartment, gathering every detail. At the same time, police officers questioned Ryan's neighbors to see if they had any information that could help the case. One of Ryan's neighbors, a woman named Nikki, spoke to the detective and provided some useful insights. Nikki knew Shayna well and thought that Shayna was more committed to Ryan than he was to her. According to Nikki, the couple often had loud, angry arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Nikki remembered a specific incident several months ago when Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna had told Nikki that she and Ryan had a violent fight, during which he lifted her up and threw her down the hallway, causing her injuries. Nikki believed Shayna and encouraged her to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna decided not to take legal action. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about the shooting of her boyfriend, Ryan. Before starting the interview, the officers read Shayna her Miranda rights, reminding her that she had the right to have an attorney present. Shayna chose to exercise this right and asked for a lawyer to be present. While waiting in the interrogation room, Shayna filled out some paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite having asked for a lawyer, Shayna still chatted with the detective. When asked who the victim was, Shayna calmly replied that it was the man she had killed. This response showed a clear lack of emotion, as it was obvious she knew the victim was Ryan, her long-term boyfriend. Shayna remained in the interrogation room with the detectives, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. She recounted the events of the previous night, describing how Ryan had allegedly grabbed her by the throat and violently thrown her around the apartment. At some point during the investigation, the detective temporarily left the room, replaced by another officer. Shayna began to reveal more details about her encounter with Ryan to this new officer. She alleged that Ryan had been extremely aggressive prior to the shooting, hurling insults at her, calling her crazy, and taunting her while brandishing a gun. Shayna believed that Ryan's behavior that night was fueled by drug use, which contributed to his violent outbursts. Throughout the interview, Shayna consistently stuck to her version of the events that culminated in the shooting. She claimed that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, handling ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol, when she noticed him staring aggressively at her from across the table. At that moment, she became aware of his intentions and realized he was trying to evict her from his condo. Shayna confessed to picking up the gun and firing it in the midst of the chaos, hitting Ryan with a single bullet. Shayna continued to describe the incident, claiming that after shooting Ryan once, she saw him twitching. Believing it was necessary to end his suffering, she fired multiple shots, ultimately killing him. In her confession, Shayna told the detective that Ryan was vain and had mentioned wanting a nose job, so she decided to grant him his wish. She deliberately aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, essentially giving him the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the intense interrogation, Shayna expressed deep concerns about the impact of the incident on her academic performance and her future romantic relationships. She confided in the detective that having a dead boyfriend would make it difficult for her to find someone to marry, especially if they discovered she had killed him in self-defense. Despite her statement, the detective arrested and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna seemed genuinely surprised by her arrest, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor compared Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, emphasizing the striking similarities between the two cases. This heightened the tension in the courtroom as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her ex-boyfriend, Ryan. According to the prosecution, Ryan dominated Shayna's thoughts, and she constantly discussed him. During the trial, the prosecutor presented testimony from Ryan's friends, who described his plans to end the relationship with Shayna and his efforts to avoid her phone calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna continued to visit Ryan's condo in Highland Heights uninvited, including on the night of the murder. The prosecution introduced evidence that Ryan had scheduled a date with Audrey Bolt, a former Miss Ohio, on the night of the murder. This information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was driven by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she was supposed to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder, but he failed to appear. It wasn't until later that she learned of his murder. The prosecution also presented evidence that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shayna in the days leading up to his death. Ryan had sought advice from his father, Jay, on how to handle the situation, and Jay had counseled him to be kind to Shayna to avoid a messy breakup. However, it appears that Shayna continued to exert control over Ryan on the day he was killed. The prosecution presented evidence of several text exchanges between Ryan and Shayna, in which Ryan clearly told her he did not want to see her that weekend because he had other commitments. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up uninvited at his condo, which was not unusual for her. The argument that ensued reached a boiling point when Ryan explicitly told Shayna their relationship was over and she could no longer control him. Prosecutors argued that this statement enraged Shayna, prompting her to pick up a gun and fatally shoot Ryan. During Shayna's trial for murdering Ryan, the prosecution showed a video of her being questioned by the police to suggest she was a cold-blooded killer. In the video, Shayna's calm behavior and responses seemed to back up the idea that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed her dancing and singing along to music, which seemed unusual for someone who had just killed their loved one in self-defense. Normally, people in such a situation would be distraught and crying due to the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's goal in showing the video was to make Shayna appear detached and unemotional, implying that her actions were not those of someone who had acted in self-defense. They claimed that her lack of tears and carefree behavior proved her guilt. However, this interpretation was open to debate and up to the jury to decide. In the end, the video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna, but it was just one part of the evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a clear storyline throughout her trial, arguing that Ryan was the aggressive and violent one on the night of the incident, leading Shayna to shoot him. To back up this claim, they built a picture of Ryan's mental state, suggesting that a mix of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines, contributed significantly to his behavior. The defense team presented the jury with autopsy results showing the presence of these drugs in Ryan's system, strengthening their argument that the drugs influenced his actions. An expert toxicologist testified for Shayna, stating that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. This testimony aimed to provide a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, implying that she may not have intended to harm Ryan. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution grew increasingly worried that she might be acquitted due to being a smart, young, and attractive woman, and that her self-defense claim might persuade the jury. However, on April 23rd, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the August 2015 sentencing hearing, Shayna persisted in shifting the blame for Ryan's death onto him, which infuriated his friends and family. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Shayna stuck to her claim of innocence and refused to acknowledge her role in the events. Under Kentucky law, A defendant who is deemed a victim of domestic violence can be eligible for early parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case ruled that Shayna did not meet the criteria, characterizing her crime as a premeditated murder. As a result, the judge handed down a 40-year prison sentence, making Shayna eligible for parole in 17 years, when she will be 41 years old in 2032. Shayna Hubers was sentenced, but she appealed for a new trial, which was granted by a judge in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had failed to disclose their felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law since felons are not allowed to serve on juries. Following a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston began in August 2018. During the opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney claimed that throughout her year-and-a-half-long relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their romance suffered because of it. The attorney stated that on the very first night Shayna and Ryan met, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting effect on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages after that. Shayna's defense lawyers claimed that her high school experience of sexual assault led to a history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They argued that this traumatic event contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team aimed to create a sympathetic image of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that her behavior was the result of a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. The defense portrayed Shayna as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They claimed that her actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but by years of abuse by her former partner. According to the defense, Ryan constantly criticized Shayna about her weight and chest size, pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant pressure contributed to her low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy, the defense argued. The defense claimed that Ryan and Shayna's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent disagreements and frustration from both parties. According to the defense, Ryan yearned for a more romantic and intimate connection, but this desire was not fulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought an injection to improve her romantic life, which was meant to address the couple's sexual difficulties and strengthen their bond. However, the defense argued that Ryan's consistent rejection and disinterest worsened the strain on their relationship, causing Shayna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Moreover, the defense alleged that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to engage in conversations with other women. In contrast, the prosecution stated that while Ryan Poston was not a perfect boyfriend, he was not abusive. They argued that Shayna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan, but rather because he had ended their relationship that night. The prosecution claimed that it was time for Ryan to break up with Shayna, as she refused to leave him alone despite the breakup, demonstrating her inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's co-workers testified that the breakup between Ryan and Shayna would be permanent this time because Ryan had always avoided breaking up with Shayna in person. According to the co-worker, Shayna had made every effort to keep Ryan. The prosecution presented text messages in which Shayna told her friends that she and Ryan's romantic encounters had brought them closer together. However, Shayna testified that these encounters had actually driven them apart. In another text message exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants, which had reduced his sex drive due to the medication's side effects. However, when Shayna testified, she claimed that Ryan had forced her into sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she begged the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, arguing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact people's lives. The mother acknowledged, however, that her pleas did not minimize the grief and pain experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Shayna was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. As part of her sentence, she must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan grew up in Canada, in a large family with his parents, Bill and Susan. Bill works at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and spends time on his many interests, including sports, yoga, and psychology, which help balance family life. In addition, his wife, Susan, is able to manage the household, take care of the children, and keep their Toronto home clean. Passers-by often stop to admire the family's beautiful and blooming garden. Although Susan loved her sons equally, but Brett seemed to be less criticized because he was generally well-behaved. Brett was very clever at getting out of difficult situations, which gave the impression that he was a good boy, although this was not always the case. Brett was extremely popular in school, with everyone wanting to be his friend or at least be able to greet him by name, just like his older brothers. After high school, Brett attended university, driven by a desire to surpass his brother's achievements. To earn extra money, he placed an ad in the local newspaper, offering to paint houses and fences for Toronto residents. At first, his business was quite successful and Brett felt proud, especially with his first income. His mother, Susan, was thrilled and often cited him as a role model for others. However, things took a turn when Brett dropped out of college to focus full-time on his paint business. Without a degree, he had to work full-time as a paint salesman, which deprived him of formal education and exposed him to paint fumes on a regular basis. For a while, Brett felt confident and superior to his brothers, but this soon changed. After a couple of years, his brothers, Christopher and Leland, graduated and landed jobs in their specialized fields. Christopher worked for the Toronto Transit Commission, and Leland became the family artist and designer. As they established their careers and moved out of their parents' home, Brett's power began to diminish significantly. To save money on rent, Brett continued to live with his parents and younger brother, who attended a school for gifted children. Brett's financial situation grew more dire over time. By 2007, when he turned 26, his debt had surged to more than $60,000. This burden led to depression, but despite his inner turmoil, Brett maintained a cheerful exterior, always willing to lend a helping hand and participate in volunteer work. His friends and acquaintances were unaware of the immense emotional pain he was hiding. Brett faced a severe situation on October 28, 2007. With winter approaching, he had no orders. Left with no other choice, Brett wore his oldest clothes, including a hat, a long sweater his brother had given him, and a long scarf his mother had knitted. It was the first time he had worn the scarf, but it was finally coming in handy. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank that was on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Brett stood in line at the bank, holding a thick folder and favoring his right foot as he waited his turn. When the bank employee called him forward, he approached her and spoke in a hushed tone. He calmly informed her that he had a gun and urged her to remove all the cash from the register and hand it over to him. He warned her that if she didn't comply, he would start shooting, and she would be the first person he would harm. She, with trembling hands, handed him all the cash from the register. Brett quietly exited the building, careful not to draw the attention of the guardians. Once outside, Brett took off running. He counted the money he had stolen from the bank, but it wasn't much, just over $1,000. To pay off his debt, he calculated that he would need to rob about 60 more banks, a crazy idea, but to him it seemed like the only option. For the first few days, Brett was fearful that the police would somehow catch up with him, so he avoided going home. He told his mother he had a job in a neighboring town and spent his nights sleeping in his car. Periodically, Brett would sneak back to his house to check if there were any police cars staking out the area. Finding none, he felt reassured that he was in the clear. The first robbery was followed by a second, then a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett changed his clothes, opting for second-hand or discarded items he found in the trash. He would burn the used clothes after each crime. Brett also bought a beard from a costume party store to further disguise himself. Brett committed a string of bank robberies in the Toronto area, and his distinctive beard made a lasting impression on the witnesses. His total intended theft across all instances never exceeded $3,000. Brett's luck ran out when police spotted his car on surveillance cameras and followed him home. They tracked his exact route, gathering details from various vehicles to prove his guilt. Further inquiries yielded little new information, so the authorities closely tracked a particular road in an attempt to shed light on the case. Their patience and hard work finally paid off. They found a potential lead. This person of interest, a bearded man, was found walking alone near a bank and was promptly detained by the officer for further investigation. Brett was under investigation for 7 months before being charged with robbery with a firearm, despite having a gun permit. Notably, he never actually carried a gun or any other weapon during the robberies. He didn't even bring a kitchen knife. Initially, he was charged with 19 counts, but after multiple appeals filed by him and his family, only 8 of those counts were upheld. Upon being given the opportunity to apply for parole, Brett submitted a petition. In it, he asked the authorities to consider the circumstances that led him to commit the crimes, including severe depression caused by 2 failed relationships and a significant amount of debt. He also reiterated that he had never intended to harm anyone during the robberies, as evidenced by his lack of weapons. His remarks were taken into account, but as a condition of his potential parole, he was required to undergo a session with a psychologist. The sessions had a positive impact on Brett. During his time in prison, he had lost touch with his family, but he took the initiative to reconnect with them. The positive changes in Brett were noticed by the commissioners, and on November 24, 2010, he was released from prison. However, the freedom he had fought so hard for turned out to be more challenging than he had anticipated. Prior to his career as a painter, Brett struggled with deep emotional pain that weighed heavily on him. He had previously been a bank robber and served time in prison, which damaged his reputation. As a result, no company would hire him, and even those who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they discovered his true identity. The neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and visited frequently, now spread unpleasant rumors about the family. The Brett family quickly sold their house and relocated to Scarborough. Susan started a new garden, and Brett found a job with a trading company. Although the pay was low, his parents helped him financially to rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist, who consistently advised him to maintain a strong connection with his family. Brett's life took a turn for the better when he met Kristen Baxter in September 2011. Kristen was an amazing person who had her own apartment with a stunning sea view. She was also into sports, which helped her stay in shape. What Brett appreciated most about her was that she didn't care about his past. They enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son in a happy relationship and were confident that Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential. However, just when everything was going well, tragedy struck. Brett's father passed away, leaving him in shock and sending him into a depressive state. As a result, Brett started visiting his psychologist more frequently to cope with his emotions. Brett was juggling two responsibilities, supporting his mother financially and nurturing his relationship with Kristen. They were both young adults, eager to build a stronger and more significant relationship with each other. Brett fell deeply in love with Kristen and decided to carry out an important plan. He had some savings and, after discussing his plans with his mother, decided to propose to Kristen with a ring. His mother supported his decision and gave him money to buy a ring. Although Kristen didn't need an expensive gift, Brett chose a gold ring with a large diamond to make the proposal special. Kristen happily accepted his proposal. As they began planning their wedding, Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was worried about the high costs and how they would affect his job. Brett found a job opening at a large technology company on the internet and applied for it. He updated his resume and submitted it, and was even invited for an interview, which he successfully passed. As a result, he was offered the job and was thrilled. He eagerly shared the news with his fiancée and mother, and asked them for money to buy an expensive suit for work. His mother agreed to help him, and he purchased the suit. However, just as Brett was about to start his new job, the company called him to inform him that they had to withdraw their offer. The security department had discovered his past criminal record, and the company could no longer hire him. This news was devastating for Brett, and his mood plummeted. He felt like giving up on his job search and education, wondering why he was wasting his time applying for jobs that he would never get due to his past mistakes. He decided that it would be better to use the money his mother and brothers had given him for something else. Brett had dropped out of university, but he didn't tell his family or his counselor. To maintain the illusion of success, Brett would wear a suit and tie, then change into casual clothes on the way to his job as a house painter. He would tell his relatives that he worked in an office. To further deceive his loved ones, Brett would post fake photos on social media, pretending to be at work or attending business events. He would also fake phone calls, making it seem like he was busy with work-related issues. Brett's family had no idea that he was hiding the truth about his life. As Brett's wedding to Kristen approached in September 2016, his deception reached new heights. He rented an expensive restaurant for the reception, which cost $100 per guest. His family was thrilled, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around with a prestigious job and a beautiful fiancée. However, Brett's deceptions became so overwhelming that he could no longer control his lies. Brett's wedding was just a month away, and he was struggling to cover the costs. He had been borrowing money from his mother, but when she could no longer help him, he pressured her to find a higher-paying job. Meanwhile, he was planning a bachelor party and had invited all his friends and brothers. Brett had a secret. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer for a technology company. When he finally confessed to his counselor, the counselor advised him to come clean to his mother. After much procrastination, Brett told his mother the truth, which devastated her. She bragged to everyone about her son's success. Brett's mother demanded that he tell his fiancée, Kristen, the truth, threatening to do so herself if he didn't. She also warned him that his brothers were aware of the situation and were on her side. However, Brett couldn't bring himself to confess to Kristen, despite knowing that the wedding was unlikely to happen due to his deception. With less than a month to go before the wedding, Brett remained silent, knowing that Kristen deserved to know the truth before it was too late. Brett was anxious about his mother revealing a potentially scandalous secret to his fiancée, Kristen. Every time her phone rang, he would tense up, holding his breath until he realized it wasn't his mother on the line, but rather one of Kristen's friends inquiring about her wedding plans. Eventually, Brett came up with a plan to silence his mother for good. As a convicted felon, Brett was prohibited from owning firearms. He decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon, to carry out his plan. Interestingly, His late father had taught him how to shoot a crossbow at targets in their garden, a hobby that Brett had excelled at. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows at a local sporting goods store and hid them in his garage, disguising them among construction debris. He also created a fake alibi by rigging his computer to automatically post pre-written comments on YouTube. He achieved this by attaching a spoon to a fan, which was connected to his computer. The fan was set to a timer, making it seem like Brett was actively using his computer at the time of the crime. Brett made everyone believe that he spent the whole day at home, watching videos and commenting on them. However, on the morning of August 25th, he had other plans. He put on disguising clothes that concealed his face, sneaked out of the house through the back door to avoid the security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. He wants to eliminate anyone who might stand in the way of the peaceful life he and Kristen are building. When Brett arrived at his parents' house, his mother, Susan, was taken aback by his unexpected visit. She wasn't feeling well that day, but Brett persisted in persuading her not to reveal his plans to his future wife. Despite her poor health, Susan firmly refused to comply with Brett's demands. As he continued to pressure her, Brett's anger escalated, and Susan sensed that something was terribly wrong. She noticed the crazed look in her son's eyes and warned him that she had already called for help and that Christopher was on his way. Brett's anger reached a boiling point. He rushed to the garage, grabbed a crossbow, but his rage and adrenaline surge made him unable to aim properly. Instead, he used the crossbow's butt to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he tightened a rope around her neck. After covering her body with plastic bags, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows, ready to face whoever was coming next. Brett's brother Christopher was lured into a trap by the suspect. As he entered the garage or the yard, Brett, who was hiding in the bushes, ambushed and shot Christopher in the neck. Christopher died shortly after the attack. Alexander, the youngest brother, was the next target. The suspect had also managed to lure him, but Alexander's outcome was different. Shot in the neck with an arrow, Alexander was critically injured but didn't die instantly. He screamed and cried for help as the attack took place. Throughout this violence, Leland remained asleep on the second floor, oblivious to the crime happening nearby and to the identity of the perpetrator, who was also a family member. It was Alexander's screams that startled Leland out of sleep, ran downstairs, and stumbled upon the horrific scene of his brother Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett, and Leland ended up in control, forcing Brett to back down. Leland immediately fled to a neighbor's house and called the police. With no means of escape, Brett remained in the house, realizing too late that his actions had disastrous consequences. In a desperate attempt to make amends, he composed a text message to Kristen, pleading for her forgiveness. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers found Brett, covered in blood, sitting beside his critically injured brother Alexander, who would later succumb to his injuries in the hospital. Brett voluntarily surrendered to the authorities, requesting to be handcuffed and taken into custody. During his confession, he revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden beneath packages in the garage, and acknowledged that she was beyond help. Brett admitted at the police station during the trial that he had not intended to kill Susan, but rather to scare her. In contrast, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, who were witnesses to the crime. If they had not been present, they would still be alive. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his struggles with depression, but this did not lead to a more lenient sentence. Despite Brett's cooperation with the investigation and his voluntary confession, the judge imposed 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. Brett will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the incident, has refused to speak to reporters, but he is well known in Toronto as the one who narrowly escaped the carnage. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Foster family. Christopher Foster had always been considered a success. His mother, Enid, described him as someone who actively pursued financial opportunities from an early age. Along with his younger brother, Andrew, he aspired to follow in the footsteps of their late father, who had been a sales manager. Although they both aimed to become successful businessmen, Chris and Andrew had had a tense relationship since they were children. Andrew later explained that Chris's confidence and assertiveness had overshadowed Andrew's quiet nature. Despite this, both brothers were very close to their mother, Enid. In 1987, Chris married Jill, a housewife, and they had their daughter Kirsty in 1993. Chris's path to wealth began in the late 80s when he worked as a mattress salesman and used inexpensive pizza boxes for insulation. His life changed dramatically after he founded a successful engineering company. This business made Chris a self-made millionaire through the development of an innovative insulation material that became essential in the oil industry. The Piper Alpha oil rig explosion on July 6, 1988, had led to a catastrophic fire that lasted for days and claimed the lives of 167 people. After watching the news, Chris saw an opportunity in this tragedy and identified a market niche for fireproof insulation specifically for oil and gas rigs. Although many oil companies showed interest, they wanted certification of the product's effectiveness before signing a contract. To prove its value, Chris took the financial risk of mortgaging his house to fund an experiment. The test was successful. His product, OverShield, showed exceptional resilience compared to other insulation materials when exposed to fire. It even received a rare A1 fire test rating. Major oil companies quickly placed orders, making Christopher Foster a millionaire almost overnight. Reports suggested that he earned so much money that he didn't know how to spend it all. As his business grew, Christopher's annual turnover increased significantly from £50,000 to £1 million. By 2004, Chris's net worth had been reported to be £10 million. That same year, his wife Jill noticed a house in Shropshire Life magazine. It was Usbaston House, a beautiful mansion in Maesbrook, a wealthy village in Shropshire, England. The estate was 16 acres in size, had its own lake and equestrian grounds. Despite being offered at around £1.5 million, the house still needed repairs. Jill was so intrigued that Chris made an offer the next morning. Foster's family quickly sold their house and moved to Usbaston House. Chris then invested a further £50,000 to install a swimming pool and landscape the property. After settling down, Chris led a lavish lifestyle. He bought 2 Porsches, one for himself and one for Jill, a James Bond-style Aston Martin, Range Rovers, and many other vehicles. Their daughter Kirsty attended a private boarding school and Chris also bought her several horses. Kirsty spent time with her horses when not at school and participated in equestrian competitions. Friends described her as quiet, thoughtful, and kind. In addition, Chris also bought 4 dogs and several pigeons. He further enhanced their lives by hiring a butler and a personal assistant, and the house had antique furniture worth more than £200,000. Chris's most expensive hobby was his passion for shooting, demonstrated by his expensive gun collection, each costing between £12,000 and £12,500, equivalent to nearly $20,000 at the time. Chris often attended shooting parties that could last 3 days, with bills running up to £8,000. He had a habit of leaving guns around the house. Occasionally, when pigeons made a mess of Chris's car, he would shoot them, much to Jill's frustration. In one disturbing incident, when Kirsty's black Labrador began disturbing the sheep, Chris was unable to control the dog and led it down a country road to shoot it in the head. Chris was a successful businessman but lacked a long-term vision. Notoriously impulsive, he craved instant gratification and was quick to cut ties with people who annoyed him. Chris enjoyed being admired and envied by others for his wealth, and social status was very important to him. Over time, both Chris and Jill moved up the social ladder, and it became clear to those close to Chris that he wanted to move away from his roots in Wolverhampton. Jill enjoyed shopping sprees and spent her days doing self-care activities like nail and hair appointments, along with beauty treatments like manicures and Botox injections. Chris and his family regularly went on luxury vacations, staying in luxury hotels and enjoying the best food. These lavish trips could sometimes cost up to £20,000 each, and Chris didn't hesitate to pay. However, unbeknownst to his friends and family, Chris had reached his financial limit and began withdrawing money from his business. His excessive spending had led to financial imbalance, with more money going out than coming in. In 2003, Chris had signed an exclusive contract with DRC, giving them the exclusive rights to produce his oil rig sealant. By 2004, his net worth had been reported to be £1 million. However, by 2005, he owed £2.8 million. Instead of cutting costs, Chris, due to his lavish spending habits, sought more money from other sources. Despite the exclusive agreement with DRC, he signed another contract with another company to sell his products. DRC discovered this infringement and sued Chris, resulting in a lawsuit and DRC acquiring Chris's patent. Chris went bankrupt, and in 2007, his company was dissolved. His assets worth £3 million were frozen and his salary was gone. Despite serious financial troubles, Chris continued to act as if nothing significant had happened. At the same time, Chris became involved in a dispute with his accountant, who reported him to the Inland Revenue for tax evasion. Chris had failed to pay VAT, national insurance, and various other taxes. To deal with his increasing tax obligations, he had to borrow from banks to ease his financial strain. In addition, he had mortgaged the Osbaston house 3 times and withdrawn money from more than 20 different bank accounts. Despite his lavish lifestyle and constant spending, Chris still tried to hide the fact that he was deeply in debt. Chris gradually found himself struggling with overwhelming challenges, aware that time was ticking away and fearful of losing everything. However, during a conversation with a friend about houses, Chris insisted that he would never sell Osbaston house. Struggling with the pressure to maintain his flashy and knowing that his time and money were running out, Chris repeatedly sought professional help. He confided in the doctor, revealing his feelings of depression and suicidal thoughts. He started taking antidepressants. In August 2008, Chris came across a letter from his house managers posted on the front gate. The letter reported that they planned to return the following Tuesday to reclaim the house and other assets. The housekeeper said that when she showed Chris the letter, Chris appeared confused but remained silent. The nightmare that Chris had been avoiding had now become a harsh reality. He was on the brink of losing all his material possessions. The thought of Kirsty and Jill losing their familiar lifestyle was unbearable for Christopher. His family faced the possibility of returning to Wolverhampton, saying goodbye to their lavish lifestyle. For a proud man like Chris, such a situation would have been extremely humiliating. On August 21, 2008, a friend contacted Chris via text message to ask about his health, and he replied, "Not good, things are about to happen to me." On August 25, 2008, the Foster's family received an invitation to a barbecue and clay pigeon shooting event. They then joined the gathering. None of the attendees noticed any signs of difficulty in the Fosters. Witnesses recalled that Chris appeared happy. Their family still exuded happiness without knowing what Chris had planned that night. Chris informed Jill that he wanted to leave the gathering. Although Jill wanted to stay a little longer, they eventually left around 8:30 p.m., arriving home just a few minutes later at 8:44 p.m., their route captured by home security footage. Soon after, Jill went to bed. At 11:30 p.m., Chris went upstairs to check on Kirsty, urging her to go to bed while continuing to text a friend online. Around midnight, Chris decided to turn off the internet, causing Kirsty to end her conversation with her friend and go to bed. At 3 a.m., Chris began his violent rampage. He entered Jill's room and used a silencer to shoot her in the head while she was sleeping. Next, he went to Kirsty's room and killed her in the same way. Home security cameras recorded Chris's actions as he carried a shotgun outside the dog cage, killing each dog with a shot to the head. He then went to the stables and killed the horses before burning the stables with the animals inside. Chris appeared expressionless in the video. To prevent firefighters from reaching the house, Chris blocked the main entrance, shooting at the tires to make movement more difficult. He also pumped 200 liters of oil from the family's tank into the house's basement through connecting pipes. It is clear that Chris took deliberate steps to completely destroy the Osbaston house. His actions appeared to have been motivated by a desire to prevent others from acquiring property that he could not keep. Chris burned down his house and covered his car and belongings in oil. The fire quickly spread and destroyed everything. Chris, still carrying a rifle, went back into the house and lay down next to Jill's body in the bedroom, holding her as flames engulfed them. At 4:11 a.m., the security cameras stopped working. A neighbor saw the growing fire and called for help. Firefighters quickly arrived. The fire was too intense and difficult to control. As firefighters tried to put out the fire, neighbors watched the building burn, worried for those inside. In the following days, the media called in to search for Foster's family, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Because of Chris's wealth, the authorities opened an investigation, initially suspecting that the Foster family had been kidnapped. However, at the time, neither the bodies nor the security footage were found, so many speculated about what might have happened to them. It took 3 days for the fire to be completely extinguished. After the fire was extinguished, investigators carefully examined the house and found the bodies of Jill and Christopher on beds in a room that had collapsed into the living room. However, there was no sign of Kirsty. While some hoped she could have escaped, others feared she had been kidnapped. Sadly, Kirsty's remains were found in the rubble a few days later. Investigators used a brush to carefully collect her remains into a hearse. A fragment of Kirsty's skull revealed that she had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, like her mother. After examining the body, the police began to suspect that Chris had committed a crime. At the same time, they began investigating his financial situation. When they dug deeper, they discovered that Chris, a seemingly successful businessman, was actually heavily in debt. His total debt had reached £4 million, and when creditors tried to take his assets, they discovered that Chris had intended to demolish the house to ensure that there was nothing left for them to take. Security footage confirmed the police's suspicions. Chris committed the murders and took his own life without leaving any explanation or warning. Speculation about the motives behind the brutal crime led to 2 main theories. One theory had suggested that Chris, feeling ashamed of having lost his fortune, chose to commit the heinous act to avoid admitting his failures. Another theory had proposed that Chris, being self-centered, decided to destroy everything rather than face the possibility of loss. However, Enid had disagreed with these theories. She had firmly believed that Chris acted out of love for his family, trying to protect them from financial ruin. She had defended him and felt a deep sense of sympathy for his situation. In contrast, Chris's brother Andrew had held a very different view. Despite not speaking for 16 years, Andrew had briefly considered reconciling with Chris for their mother's sake. However, his fear of a hostile encounter had kept him from reaching out. Andrew had alleged that Chris had bullied and sexually assaulted him during their childhood, leading to a tumultuous relationship. Andrew had maintained that Chris exhibited bullying and controlling behavior. Andrew's attempts to reconcile with Chris in 1999 had been met with resistance. Chris had responded to Andrew's letter with a demand for a written apology, stating that Andrew would have to beg and scrape on bended knee to make amends. Andrew had believed that Chris refused to acknowledge his past wrongdoings and instead held on to long-standing grudges. For months after the tragedy, on December 19, 2008, a joint funeral had been held for 15-year-old Kirsty and 49-year-old Jill at their local village church. The service had been quiet and respectful, attended by close friends and family. Both Kirsty and Jill had been buried in the same plot, as requested by Jill's family. Chris had received a private funeral and was buried elsewhere. In the years following the tragedy, the remains of the burnt-out house and the family's charred belongings had been left on the site. These had included Kirsty's first aid book for her horses and a handwritten note detailing the family's meal plans for the week of the tragedy. The ruins of the house had remained until 2011 when the debris had been cleared. The 16-acre estate had been sold in 2014, with plans to build a new 6-bedroom house. Although the property had been put up for sale in 2012, it had taken 2 years to sell, reportedly after the price had been reduced. The reasons behind Christopher Foster's actions may have been financial struggles and the pressure to maintain a wealthy image. However, this had not justified the horrific outcome. Instead of having made sensible financial decisions or confiding in his loved ones, Chris had chosen a destructive path that had had devastating consequences for everyone involved.